Okay, it is 7 p.m. on October 2nd. This is the Committee of the Whole meeting for District 96, Board of Education. Margie, can you call the roll?
Mr. Barsati?
Present.
Mr. Hunt?
Here.
Ms. Kleiber? Here. Mr. Marhold?
Here.
Mr. Miller?
Here.
Mr. Muirhead?
Here.
Ms. Murphy? Here. Thank you.
Okay, is there any public comment? Are there any changes or additions to the agenda? All right. The first item up for discussion is the strategic plan.
So we've set up a different format tonight, so thanks to everybody for being part of this and allowing our different format. This is our goal-setting format. As we all know, we have sort of done this a bit in pieces since our summer schedule was really busier than we anticipated, I think, with a lot of facilities conversations and decisions that need to be made about that. So even though it's October now, still a great time to really have this opportunity as the board and superintendent. I've also invited Angela and Jim to join us here at the table to have a conversation about our draft goals and for the coming year. What I've pointed out just in the information that I've shared is that we've done this a little bit differently in the 3 years that I've been superintendent, and we continue to kind of evolve and find the way to do this in the most collaborative fashion. So again, appreciate the conversation tonight. And then also I know there'd been some drafts and ideas that had been shared, so that's available for everybody. But what I did is, in an effort to kind of move things forward, is I created an updated draft of our goals. So you have an updated draft of the 2019-2020 school year, and it would be the one that is on this letterhead, because I think you have a previous draft and then a new draft. Maybe if it's the second attachment down, let me just double check that. We're saying we got a new the second attachment under proposed goals. So I thought maybe, and Sherry, if you want to, we can kind of co-facilitate this. If you want to start with the education committee and look at the first set of goals around curriculum assessment and programming for students, and then education sort of is throughout the goals, right? So it's also in our human resource goals around professional development and the evaluation process. But why don't we start with the draft set of goals under District Goal 1 around reviewing and aligning curriculum assessments and programming standards in an effort to address the needs of the whole child and all learners.
Right, this is, kind of looks like a combination that you've done here with.
Yeah, tried to meld things together, and right. I know it's easy to sort of fall into wordsmithing, I think, also, but if we can kind of agree on sort of content and direction, and then if we wanted to do some wording refinements, otherwise we could kind of take them back and do that separately.
Does anyone have any comments? I know we can we can do a brief comparison from last year's goals, just to maybe recap how these action items are different.
I just want to, maybe if I can, before to sort of
Sure.
maybe frame up the discussion, because I've looked at, I appreciate you putting the last 3 years of those goals and objectives. And one thing that sort of struck me is that 3 years ago, they were definitely measurable. And I think goals need to be measurable. And then over the course of those 3 years, last year's was, I'm not saying they weren't good, but they weren't measurable. We couldn't say, okay, we can check this off, we actually did this. And so I guess my question to the board here is that how do we want the goals and objectives to be more prescriptive, more measurable, and more, or do we want a more, I'd say objective, where more objective? Because I was looking through these goals, and while I agree with pretty much all of it, it's really not something that we can measure. It's like
I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt too much, but I'm not sure I agree with all of that, because for the piloting, we definitely did pilot and continue. So for the actionable items, I know what you're talking about for the general goal, but at least for the action items.
Right, I guess what I'm saying is like.
You can quantify that they were done, and.
Right.
So I guess I need clarification of if you want to talk about the big goal.
I mean, a very easy one is that I looked through all like yours and Jeff's and Dan's. Everyone had something on there about finances, and we have in our goals about finances. It's like we want to maintain a solid financial position. what does that mean? Okay, does that mean 40% reserves? Does that mean 10% reserves? Does that mean 130% reserves? I mean, what does that mean? I think we need to quantify what we're trying to.
Yeah, that's raises a very good point, because we sort of have a very important dangling topic that we have to come back to, which is, we had a conversation, I don't know, 6 months ago about what our reserves should be after we're done with the projects. And we had a range of possible sort of outcomes. I think it was spanned 40% to 60%, I think was roughly the numbers. And we said that was the sort of, but we never came back and said, I think we were waiting for a little more information about what we thought the project would cost, and then we could sort of decide.
Right. I
But
think
you're
I
right,
used the
that's sort of
word
a big outstanding
maintain.
question.
Right, but I guess I'm just using that as an example because that's an easy, in my opinion, that's an easy one.
Well, for me,
so-
maintain meant if we have like a 40% requirement, it would be about, at least about there. That's why I use certain
That is
words.
the policy.
Yeah,
Right.
so for me, maintain kind of meant keep that.
Well, then I
That
guess,
area.
like I said, it's an easy example, and that's why I did it. So it's like we're talking about like playgrounds. Can we be a little bit more like?
So, I think you raise a really good point, and I think that's what I point out is in 3 years, we've done it 3 different ways. So typically as educators, and I'm proud, and probably others of you in your work talk about like a SMART goal, right? Strategic, measurable, attainable, realistic, time-bound. And so each one of these, I believe, could be turned into a SMART goal. We didn't write them that way. So last year when we wrote them in this much more kind of succinct way. What I recall at the time was that they were very palatable then for the community, right? Very easy to put up on our website, to make them very sort of readable, digestible, understandable. Perhaps not the most measurable, but I think, again, having that opportunity then to go back and say, you know, how are we measuring our outcomes, I think is the additional question. I have felt kind of philosophically, we're not all together on this process yet. And so I think, you know, David, for you to sort of back up and say, wait, do we want even altogether different format? I understand the question, and I think it's a good question if that's where we want to start tonight.
Maybe we can take one step even further back from David's point, which I'm very sympathetic to. When goals are measurable to the extent possible, it's better than when they're not measurable. But even stepping one step back further, which is there are all of these summaries that you provided here are a mixture of two things. One of the things are the goals that were formulated in 2000, was it 15? 16? And this first strategic planning thing that we did back then. Very high level sort of things. And then the sort of the second thing are the subpoints you have in there are steps that will be taken in any given year to sort of move closer to satisfying the goals. So this really is a mixture of two things. So I think we have to be very clear about that, because I think sometimes we conflate them, and they're, you know, so most of the items that are listed here are really not goals per se. They're actually
steps to achieve.
they're to-do list. They're fancy. They're, you know, glorified to-do list. We're going to do this year. And,
Yeah, because
and so, but then there's another question which I think, you know, which we should address, which is, and we've done this in the past, is do we want, in addition to the sort of goals that were established in the strategic planning session 4 or 5 years ago, do we want to also add new goals as we go along every year, because things change and we have, you know, new circumstances and whatever. And that's, I think, a separate, like, that's a sort of yet another separate topic, I think. So I think we have to keep that sort of.
Right. And the other thing, so and the strategic plan is clear, it gives good clarity. It sort of is something I inherited in my first year here. We are in the 4th year of a 5-year plan. So it starts to feel also like, we're, you know, it's.
right.
It's time for us to renew it. And, you know, I would suggest even renewing it this year if it weren't for our major facilities projects right here on the horizon.
That was the one thing I wanted
Yeah.
to add to the possible goal list, is start thinking about the process for renewing our strategic plan. Because I do feel like we've gotten to the point where we are just kind of, like, we're working within the goals structure that we created 4 years ago.
Right.
And I do feel like things have changed a bit. And maybe it's time to start thinking about how we go, you know, and I'm not saying doing strategic planning, I'm saying we kind of had a few options. I'm looking at the people who were on the board at the time. We had a few options at that time, and we went with one way. It would be good to maybe start actually, you know, thinking about how are we going to proceed with that again, how are, how we're going to engage the, just kind of getting a
Right.
plan so that when next year when
Right.
it happens, we're ready to go. Because I do feel like this is getting a little stale, and maybe that's why this conversation is kind of been a little difficult, because we're working in the confines of something that
Well, absolutely
feels
right, absolutely right.
a
And
little-
and I think that sort of that's consistent with the idea that the strategic plan, for whatever its strengths and weaknesses are, it's not the, it's not the Bible. It's not, this isn't, some thing that we have to always refer back to as being the gospel, right? It's we should be free, as circumstances and times change,
Yeah.
to say, you know what, that's not so relevant because we've solved that problem, or
Yeah.
we move
Like, I would love to
now,
be
now we have to
able
do something else.
to have a document, the next time we do a strategic plan, it would be an actual document that can, every year's a new variation. Here's the plan, here's the things we want to get done, we've done these, those are off the list, the updated strategic, that way,
Right, so we'd have more things, but
and then you can add things.
you can
and-
add things. But I would sort of think it's important for that future boards to always have the flexibility to introduce
absolutely.
things that are not even on that, because the strategic plan is. I have the feeling that if we had 60 people, I don't know, maybe 70 people showed up the first night, and maybe 40 the second, who knows. If we had a different random selection of people that showed up,
different.
it would not have been an identical plan.
Right.
So that plan is.
I think it would have had tenants that were.
I do too.
Some
I think
things
it
would have been similar.
I don't think it would have been
But-
night and day.
So maybe.
Well, it
what-
would have been different, though. There would have been,
Yes,
those
for
5 things that we said, it would have been 5.
And I don't mind redoing the process as long as we have a timeline and figure out.
Right, and that's not this year.
And
That's-
to figure out from our existing plan, what is it that we feel that we've accomplished, so we can either remove it or change it. And that's one thing we haven't done.
So maybe the way we structure our goals this year is goals that align with the 5 tenets of the strategic plan, and then another 6th category that are like
Additional goals. that we-
additional goals that are of,
Right.
Now, I thought we were all submitting goals, but there's only a few people in here, so I don't know what to do about that, because I don't know how half of you guys feel about what your new ideas were, so I don't know if we want to come back to that from those people that didn't submit, because
So I
I
feel
think.
like the ideas we got were fit in these broad
Mine were very
areas.
similar.
Oh, I know,
Yeah.
I just would have liked
Yeah.
if anyone had anything else I didn't know.
my only additional one was
Yeah.
beginning the process to start planning a new strategic plan.
Yeah,
That's
sure.
That was my
Yeah.
goal.
Yeah.
No, and it's a good
It's
one.
not
Yeah.
very measurable. I know
Yeah,
that.
sure it is, yeah.
You can document
By
it.
such and such a
Yeah.
date or something.
Yeah.
No, I think that's totally appropriate.
And I would,
That's your
yeah.
goal.
And I would tell you, I have already really feel like I've embarked, and some of the pieces I share with you are on thinking about how we would want to do that the next time around. And I know I've shared some, where some districts have moved to kind of perhaps almost less measurable, so I know I've talked about districts that have like embraced this portrait of a graduate, and they
depends
kind
on
of
the
talk about
district.
the soft skills, like how we're sort of,
That's the other thing I was going
Yeah.
to mention, that one presentation we
Yeah.
saw about a portrait of a graduate. It's like in the education tenet here, like we can talk about improving our testing scores, which is important, but it was also very interesting to see the soft skills and other skills that we want our 8th graders leaving our district with for the changing economy and the changing workforce and how jobs look now.
Something we saw as a board.
No,
something
Martha
I've
invited
shared with
us.
you informally. Just in-
Doesn't ring a bell.
Yeah, no, it was
I
an
remember
outside presentation.
talking about-
And one-way communications, and it talks about kind of the 21st century learners, which is also sometimes an overused buzzword, but
Yeah.
Collaborative skills, critical thinking skills.
It was an interesting
yeah.
presentation where there was a bunch of educators talking about like the current workforce and what kind of jobs are out there and how it's like, a very gig economy and consulting, and what kind of skill set does that take, and are we teaching that, and what, just lots of different things that I just didn't really even wasn't on my radar, but it was just very interesting. And then this one district had created this portrait of a graduate of the, for when their kids were leaving 8th grade, hopefully our district provided them these things, and it just had some were soft skills, some were, but it was just it was a really nice, I could see how the lens of everything could go through that. And I think that's something that would be pursued possibly or talked about. I don't know if it necessarily is something we want to do, but during the strategic planning is what do we want, what skill sets do we want our kids leaving here with, and.
Right, because it's really getting the community, right, to align around a vision for the outcomes of a, successful public educational system.
And it wasn't moving away from traditional, like what our traditional.
You still want kids with
curriculum,
high
what we were
levels
doing.
of competency and proficiencies
just-
and all of that, but, and again, it's articulating what we value most.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind putting that as like maybe in a separate section, like an addendum to, or in the bottom of the list, not at the bottom, but somewhere mixed in. That'd be kind of neat to say, this is what we envision them to be. And regardless of profession, it could just be what
No,
qualities
right.
you want them to have.
Yeah.
Jobs are important, but we want to make sure they're.
Yeah, and it really was taking in all the things we already do as a district,
Yeah.
like the curriculum we do, the SEL we do. It was taking everything we already do, but it was kind of just making it a portrait where it was really easy to like, oh, these are the, I thought it was interesting.
We need to share that with the 8th grade families who are incoming and leaving, or the new 6th grade families as well, to know this is what we expect.
And that's what I think of the strategic planning process, is that, to sort of engage the community and sort of talk about aspirations and the big ideas, and then yes, what does it distill down into? What do we need to do annually to make those things happen? And I believe that was the intention behind this plan too, right? In the 2015-2016 school year, there were a lot of community members that were engaged in the process, and I think the plan, spoke to needing to, for example, optimize and reconfigure facilities. There was a strong focus on the facilities component, certainly a strong fiscal component. And then obviously high levels of achievement and, sort of the health and well-being, social emotional learning opportunities for our children, and then having a highly skilled, strong teaching force and educator force in the district. So I think it's all there.
As I'm sitting here and I'm hearing it from a couple different avenues, and I'm hopeful this doesn't muddy the waters too much, but I do wonder next year, and saying this, we're here in October and we were supposed to have this discussion in the summer, but would it make sense if next year, or at least in a future time, to have the discussion of, did we meet our goals first?
Yes.
Because I don't know that we really have a detailed discussion of that. That would definitely make authoring this the next time around much easier.
Well, right, that's why when I said we have to actually check the plan.
That doesn't muddy the waters, that actually
No,
clarifies.
that's exactly.
And so,
That's exactly what we're talking
I
about.
think it's my first year. It's on the website. I did a fairly detailed presentation of progress toward our goals, and it was kind of a celebrations. I believe it was the meeting when it was also a student achievement. The time we invited students in, and we're in the auditorium, and it was like bad acoustics, bad lighting. Like I remember feeling like it all sort of fell short from the attention it needed, from the attention it deserves, and so that's certainly something that I agree we could and should get better, not just in achieving the sort of components of the strategic plan, but also annually. So in November, we're anticipating that we'll look at all of our student achievement data. It's something that school districts do, school boards do, after the state report card is released. So that's something I know that Angela and I are already planning for November COW. I mean, looking at how our students are doing, obviously is a key part of understanding where we are in terms of progressing toward our goals overall. But I do think there's kind of a, like what I'll call sort of a coherence piece in all this. And I think it's exactly what everyone is sort of chiming in and saying, like, where do we want our goals to be in terms of, truly you're asking about like format, right? Format and measurability. How do we want to then report on progress toward goals in any slightly more formalized way, I think could be, is a good idea. Are we in agreement and sort of on the direction? And so I guess when we go back to this format, to me this speaks about sort of agreements and direction. We could, again, I'm happy to take another, sort of a take at it and look at a more SMART goal format. It becomes, each one of these then becomes sort of a page, right? So it becomes a very different kind of document.
I mean, the district I worked in, they were more broad like this because it was easy for people to understand and easy for the teachers to grasp. They're more like an umbrella, similar to the vision statement, but more specific. And so, I mean, districts do it different ways.
Right.
But I am comfortable with this as long as it has an action plan. I don't mind the categories. I think for strategic planning, it was very easy for people to figure out, okay, finance and education and facilities, and it was easy for people to grasp that, and I think that's helpful to bring everybody in. But
And while some of these aren't like exactly measurable, like you're like quantifiable, I do say like just looking at the first one, continue to pilot new units of study in K through 5 science. Like at the end of the year, very easy to outline exactly what was done, who did what, how it happened, what were the results, what's going moving forward. So I do think they are all things that you can show, the answer wouldn't be, we continued to pilot it,
Could I just, can I just a quick point on that? I think you're right about that. But I think if we did something like that, I think we should do that. We should have a summary at the end of the year, whatever we did, piloted this or piloted that, this is what the result. That's like checking off the part of the to-do list. It doesn't necessarily, even if we do that, even if we do all these things, it doesn't mean necessarily that we've actually gotten closer to our true goal. You know what I'm saying?
Well, it depends again how you go back to, do we pilot new units of study in science in order to improve science proficiency on the Illinois State assessment, by the end of the school? So that's, I think, to David's point, when if you say to me, make these more measurable, turn these into SMART goals, I know Angela and I could work together on those, Jim and I could work together on those financial ones. It becomes the multi-page document, but is that what we want, right? And I feel like that is a core question.
And that's what was the purpose of my whole initial is like, do we want that or do we want to keep this format?
Well, and I think it's understood by the staff that there should be growth every year. Now, if you want a specific growth, we'd have to talk more closely with the staff and say, we want this much growth.
Right, or you say like
It is
perform at high
understood by them
levels
that their students grow when they learn, especially with the new pilot program. I think it's more obvious than ever. I don't know about how you feel about that, but I do.
And I'll also say there are some goals that probably aren't measurable as well as others. And so, how do we address those? Not that I know muddied the water, so.
No, it doesn't.
But,
And the reason I'm going to say it doesn't, and I'm going to pick on one of the educational goals, continue to refine social and emotional learning strategies. That will always be there because that's an essential, I think, ingredient to making our whole children. But I think and I do agree with you, the bullet point is what are we doing that does that? So we do SEL 3 days a week.
Or five.
Or five, whatever it happens
to
to
a
be.
workship
So
on
I-
SEL strategies.
Right.
And
It depends
that's
on how you want
that's a
it.
goal that
Right.
it's a goal that's always going to be there. It has to be there, otherwise we're not
Right.
we're
not
failing
doing
our
our job.
kids if we're
And I might
not.
tell you, if we wanted sort of to that, you might say, continue to refine social emotional learning strategies for all students as evidenced by teachers more highly trained in the strategy. So,
Right.
and then what I'm
Agreed.
reporting to you is that 26 teachers went to a workshop on social emotional learning, not that our children's social emotional skills went from here to here, because
Right.
I'll tell you what, having spent years and years in education, measuring social emotional learning is
Very difficult.
Right.
very difficult.
Yeah, it is.
And there have
It is.
been
Right.
arguments and papers and all
Well,
kinds,
and what
but-
instrument do you use?
Right, exactly, right, and do you
So-
think it's good,
Do
and
we
does-
have
yeah.
an overabundance of discipline
Right.
issues?
It can be as measured by a reduction in discipline referrals, yeah.
Or
Yeah.
no increase in
Right.
discipline
Right.
referrals?
Right.
Because
Right.
Something else is we get a new crop of students
What I
every
think
year.
I think that that's a stronger, I think, kind of measurement that you're outlining, Joel, because it goes back and directly measures the goal. Where so you say we sent 26 teachers to a workshop, well, that's great.
don't know.
How do we know they learned something useful or what they're putting into place is actually effective? We don't know that unless we actually measure the outcome, I think.
A student outcome. So
The
you're talking
student
about
outcome,
everything
yes.
having a
Like
student
Joel said,
outcome,
yes,
right, yeah, right. So that's
We
a
have
difference, like,
fewer
that's-
disciplinary issues,
yeah.
or whatever the measure
Right.
might be. I
Right.
think if we can tie things to the thing we care about
Yes.
directly.
You know what that reminds me of? I'm sorry. It reminds me of something called logical consequences when you're a teacher and your child draws all over the desk when they're a little kid and you say, what do you do for them to, you don't want to punish them necessarily. What do? They have to clean the desk. So it reminds me of that where you have to come up with what's the logical consequence or what's the logical result. It's actually very closely
But I
parallel.
think, right.
It's kinda cool.
I think we're all very much in the same sort
Yeah.
of, ballpark, for lack
It's
of a better,
neat, though. It
it's
parallels
like these
teachers,
are,
yeah.
these are core to our shared work.
The mission of the school.
Yes,
Well,
yeah.
it's-
So as we're talking about it here, I think, Joel was mentioning it, I think David was mentioning it as well. I think it would make sense to have a combination of items that are both measurable and ones that are a little bit more aspirational or harder to quantify.
Because if you force everything to have an outcome, sometimes those outcomes aren't.
I would say, though, what's essential is that we have a discussion where we go over it and with certain, one set time, and we go over them, and the ones that are more aspirational, did we make them? That's a discussion for the board. I'm fearing a little, if we make everything quantifiable, that amongst this group, we are outside professionals. Some of us have experience in education, some of us do not. We're sitting with the educational professionals. It seems a little tough to me to be giving out, direct measurements and saying this is what's important down to this quantity. I just fear that we could get lost in the weeds, and as Jeff was mentioning, perhaps we could say, yes, we met all these things, but did we? Or we did all these things, but did we truly meet our goals?
I almost feel like a lot of those outcomes would come in the reporting of the year. So when we're talking about the reduction in discipline, so when we're talking about, so when Martha is doing a presentation at the end of the year about what goals we met, she would have points under there, we did this, we did send 26, you're right, you can't send 26 people to a workshop and then assume that has had an effect. You don't know. But it is something to say that we're trying to teach her, we had this, we had this, we had this. These are all the things under SEL. So I think for me, where I'm having a difficulty is I don't want to create the measures right now. I want, the evidence to come in to support. I mean, it's certainly not
Dan, I
like-
think Dan's point is well taken. I think your point is well taken. It's not our job to sit here for us to come up with the measurements, but I think it is it's legitimate for us to request that, to the extent possible, and it's not always possible, not 100% possible, to the extent possible that the things the direct goals, which is the impact on students, be directly measured to the extent possible. Not always possible, not always easy, but that's far more informative if we can do that than to say we sent a bunch of people in a workshop. Because that's great. We don't know that it had any impact.
And then you gave the workshop.
Unless it's under the staff training goal,
I was gonna say, but it
then
could
the
be
number of
under-
people you send to the workshop
I was
might
gonna say,
be
that could be under.
Right.
Yeah.
for another goal.
Under
Yeah,
human
and
resources.
that clearly
But-
doesn't talk directly relate to SEL
Right,
goal
I'm saying that-
outcomes, but it does
right.
relate to other possible
Yeah.
goals that we have, that we want our
Yeah, but I was
staff to
referring. I was
train.
thinking about it in that context.
Yeah.
But something like that, it's definitely measurable. It's definitely, I think we could all agree it's very important, and it is very reflective of the performance of the district. Things like that are absolutely make total sense to be on a list of measurable goals.
Well, I guess then, should we maybe just go through this and sort of say, okay, what do we think can be measured, should be measurable, and which ones should be more like aspirational? So that, because I think we're all in agreement here, it seems like there's some sort of consensus that, we need something that's measurable, but at the same time, things are not going to necessarily be as measurable as we want, or we might be measuring the wrong things. I
Right.
mean, just
Well,
from
would
the
it
SEL,
be-
are we talking like detentions? Is that a good thing to measure? I mean,
Right. I mean, would it be more effective to ask Martha to go back and draw something up rather than having us sort of do that?
Well, so it might be
right now,
helpful
or-
because I think a fair amount of time, one, it's linked to the strategic plan, it's linked to some feedback and input that the board has provided along the way, are these the right direction? Are these the right sort of values, vision, potential actions that require or need more measurability? Is there anything that's like, I don't think that's important, or I don't think that should be part of what the school district is striving for? Is there sort of at least doing a check and a consideration of like, is this the
So
right
you said
stuff?
go through that right now and just sort of say, is this the right direction?
Yeah, I think that would be helpful.
I think.
Or are there things that we've left off?
Yeah, I think continuing the pilot, though, has to be crucial because we've done maybe 1 or 2 sections, maybe up to 6 sections. But if you're really going to see progress, which from hearing from the teachers, it sounds like they like the new pilots, you have to continue the pilots. So I don't see how that one's not relevant. But
All 5 of them under
Yeah.
curriculum. seems
the only
great.
thing I had a question about with report card, and I totally understand new project-based learning standards and portfolios, and I'm a proponent of that as well. The only thing I wonder about is what happens from the transition from Hauser to RB when they go back to a traditional report card, and I struggle with that. And I'm not sure there is an answer, but how do we
That's a
do?
great question.
How do we deal with a new learning-based standards report card that is more reflective of an individual's niche in specific areas rather than a traditional card, and I don't know the answer to that, but it's a question I have when they go back to RB and then they're given the traditional report
Can I
card.
back up just, so if I can actually back up a little bit, when this says resulting in a new student report card, that's not necessarily saying a standards-based report card. There's research that we would have to continue to work on. I know there was there was a reporting progress committee that was in the works last year. And there's been work that's been done through that committee. And during my transition, I was brought abreast of what was done there. We need to continue those conversations.
Yeah, and I like a lot of it. I think it's
what we're looking at with the new student report card is it could be standards-based, it could continue to be grade-based, but what we're hearing from the teachers right now is that what we're currently using doesn't match what they're teaching and what they're assessing. So a lot of work has been done in the area of curriculum around standards-based instruction.
Right.
And so the tool we have to communicate with families on what their students are learning and how they're doing with that isn't matching what we're doing in the classroom. And so that's what we need to tweak. And then we need to work as a committee to decide if that is a standards-based report card. And part of that research then looks into how does that transition from the elementary level to the middle school level to the high school level.
I know, because elementary is a very different situation than, you got a 90% in English at house, or I think the parents get that. They can see that testing was 60% of their grade. The elementary is more 1, 2, 3, 4, and here are your numbers for each item. Yeah, I just don't know. I don't know the answer to that. And maybe I don't mind addressing it or looking into it. It's so hard when they go back to high school and it's this kind of stringent place. I don't know how we.
And I think, and that's
Address
actually,
that.
that one was worded intentionally this way about, sort of it's really looking at sort of practices around grading, practices around how we assess kids. And it's what Angela just said, resulting in a new report card. And again, is that, and the reason you do it is that there's, obviously linking our standards and our assessments and also having students and families have ownership and understanding of that. There is a research base to that says when kids understand their own learning better, they learn better, right? So, and when families are engaged and understand what it is we're trying to measure and do with kids, that's good for kids too, right? So there's a lot of intentions in all of that.
It's a balance,
Yeah, right.
because if you have 60 standards on there, the parents are going to get lost in that minutia and not know what
Right.
they're reading.
But this is,
So, yeah, I totally understand that. I just didn't know what to do with that transition point.
Sort of along those lines, I guess under that, I should say under that section, under like number 4, it says continue to refine. I almost say we need to review and continue, just because if something's working, we don't necessarily need to change it, I guess.
so just kind of review strategies, review practices.
Well, this goes back to your first point, though, which I think is how do you measure this? And if we make some adjustments, then how do we know those actually had a positive benefit?
Which I was going to get to my next.
This is a hard one.
Right, this is, and
quantify,
this is sort of my next question, is sort of next, both on 3 and 4, when we say we review and refine, how are we, and this is more just for my questions, how do we determine if something's effective? Because why are we refining something if,
Right.
how do we know we need to refine it, I guess is my question.
Well, so I'll tell you, in terms of
comes out
social
of
emotional, I think
review.
we have good programming. Teachers actually use curriculum tools around teaching social emotional learning skills. We use social workers who then really intervene and support children that may need something than what the general classroom teacher is able to do. So I think there are a lot of strategies, but I think if you talk to a teacher, a social worker, a principal, they would tell you that's something we always have to get better at, right? So I think there is a continue to refine.
Okay. And I guess my question is, and this now I'm going to probably possibly muddy the waters now, but doesn't it even matter for like pace on the kid? Because what might work for Mary doesn't work for
Absolutely.
Jane, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, social emotional is incredibly hard to measure. The 5 Essentials survey tries to do some of that. We have looked at some student surveys. We've looked at some individual student assessments. A couple of years ago I was at a workshop on all about sort of measuring what matters, and I think a person's very lengthy paper ended with, "We haven't found a good way to measure social emotional learning skills." So it's, and I don't mean to like, so I'm not throwing my hands up, you know, but it's one of those where review and refine our practices. So one area for the board to measure is to understand teachers going to professional development workshops, is to understand that perhaps we pick a new core tool. You know, certainly to look at, you know, we can look at visits to the social works office or disciplinary referrals, that kind of thing. I think the other thing I'm always sort of stop and I think about too is that we have to be careful that we're not spending more time kind of creating the check marks in the, how many times did you have somebody in your office?
Well, then
32 times today.
it might
There's
not,
more, you know.
it might not be
There's always the
genuine.
danger
Yeah,
of
I
creating
know.
perverse incentives.
That's
I
right.
was just gonna say,
Yeah.
I 100%.
Because then the principals might say, well, I'm not going to see anyone because
Yeah.
it affects our
I don't put in
results.
that,
or-
Something in my own work
Yeah.
that I find is, you know, I work somewhere that's heavily grant funded and we have to report to so many different people. And we spend more time reporting on outcomes that takes away from the actual time
Yeah.
that people are doing their job, which gets really to the point. So there's got to be some sort of balance because we don't need outcomes for the sake of outcomes.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
I totally, but at the same time, I sort of like keep coming back to this sort of idea of like in medicine. So if you were going to try to introduce a new drug into the market, there's a very well-defined, very carefully thought-through protocol on how you do that. There's different phases of clinical trials. You have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. By the time you get to phase 3, there's already sort of strong evidence that there's something there, or you wouldn't get that far. And then you do the sort of full bore, randomized, pre-registered, double-blind experiments, and even then, when you get to the stage 3, which is like you don't get there unless everything has gone pretty well up to that point, it's like way more often than not, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. And I feel like so what's the point of that example? The point of the example is that just because you think something is a good idea or something it should work, I have my 5 students that seem to be effective, there's really no solid evidence that that's true.
Well, maybe one of the goals
And-
should be that we collect and identify research-backed.
Well, that was one of my
Practices
proposals, was that we
that
actually,
improve
that we
student-
actually do that. We do as a matter of course.
Right.
Do very
But
systematic
that it's
reviews.
very specific. Yeah.
But I guess my question is, it goes back to what I said earlier, is what should we be measuring? Because the thing is, with, like, you going off of your example, Jack, those clinical trials, you're going after a specific disease, a specific cell
Right.
or something like that.
Yes.
Here, you're going off looking for a specific behavior, but how is that behavior measured? And
Depends on if it's academic or if you're talking about the SEL. Those are
Right, and that's what I'm trying to get at. It's like, do we measure it by number of detentions? Do we measure it by number of tardias? Do we measure it by
Right.
academic performance? I mean, what are we trying to measure here? And so that's, I guess, where, well, I agree that we should be doing a good job at doing, trying to possibly track this, but at the same token, I don't want us to be spending, to Linda's point, all this time trying to gather this information, because that's not what.
Yeah, I'm not sure SEL
here's a
belongs
thought.
in that.
I'm sorry, go
Oh,
ahead, Sharon.
I'm sorry. I just was saying I'm not sure SEL belongs in that highly specific outcome-related area. It's just too difficult and too personal, I think. So I would separate that when we're talking about the specific outcomes that we want, proof for.
But I mean, that goes, but also that goes to like the multi-tier systems of support, like new pilots of study. What are we trying to capture with this?
Well, there it seems like it is amenable to quantification, because you could say that we used to have 100 kids that were in this program, and now we only have 50 because
Right.
the program is so successful that we've improved it so much that we hardly have any kids that need it anymore. I mean, that would be a clear measurement.
But then you'd have to also, not to cut you off, Joel, but then you have to also randomize. Is it because we have different batch of students now? Do we have better students, or I don't want to say better students, that didn't come out right, but like, do we have students that are different that don't need that support?
Well, that's why we need
you'd have to do
practices
something.
that
Right.
research has proven work for lots of different types of children. And I think we can identify that. I'm sorry, Dan, I
No,
want you
it's
to
okay.
talk.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Well, here's my thought, especially since we have a limited amount of time here this evening. Perhaps would it make sense then to go over what we have in terms of proposals in front of us, and then allow Martha and the administration to set some of these measurements, to come back to the board and say, you know, this is how we propose to measure these goals that we consider measurable. And then we have that second discussion at that point. Is that adequate? Does that make sense? Do we need changes from there?
Well, I think that's a good idea, but I think what we need to do is still go through and give them sort of, like, go through this. But
absolutely.
I also think there's going to be some goals that we should not even try to go down the road of, like, trying to quantify.
I agree.
Because there's just going to be some that just, we're going to be spending more time trying to figure out what's the best way to quantify it and to do it, even though I'm all about quantification. But I think that we'd be getting tight, just getting too much into the weeds and not being successful ourselves.
Two side notes, and I appreciate, kind of, Linda, what you're saying is sometimes organizations can spend more time measuring than the doing, right? And so as schools, I think we are practitioners, we are the doers. We also need to be the measurers. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be. I will tell you, when I arrived here in 2016, my office was full of binders and binders and binders that were some documentation of progress toward goals. And the binders were this thick, and there were many of them. And I remember having a conversation, at least with some board members, and saying, is this what you want me to do? Because if this is what you want me to do, I can do that. But I think it becomes, I spend my time measuring rather than doing. And should there be a better balance or more careful balance? Certainly. I will tell you that I recently became acquainted with an organization. I actually brought their information because they really intrigued me, and this is not a pitch for them tonight, but there's a group. So good research in public education and education in general is lacking, right? So, you know, to use the analogy of medicine, which people do, often linked directly into a university, right? Where the research is happening is usually part of a university medical system. School districts were different than that, for good or for bad. That's not where we are. We probably should be linked to major universities in research ways, perhaps, in the future. This is an organization. I mean, you pay for membership, and they will come in and they will conduct research. They will do essentially what you would call program evaluation, right? Or they will help you study a problem, or they will join you with other groups of professionals across the country that are studying the same problem. As a matter of fact, they've invited Angela and I to come to a roundtable, and what they call an executive roundtable on third grade reading skills and scores that we're going to next week. And they're inviting us because they would like us to become, you know, clients, right? I understand that, but they have looked at research on maker spaces. They have looked at research on full-day kindergarten. They have, you know, so it's very intriguing to me that there are professional organizations now that are relatively new that are saying to K-12 public schools, we'll be your research partner. You'll pay us a fee. You'll tell us what your problems are. You'll tell us what your questions are. We'll link you collaboratively to other professionals in the field. Like, to me, that's really interesting. That's one of those missing pieces.
It's sort of the devil's in the details on exactly how they do that, but it sounds in principle,
Yeah.
that's something that's worth exploring. So I'm
Yeah.
happy that you guys are looking into it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, to me, it just depends.
Right.
Because I don't know enough about
that's
it,
what
but
you
yeah.
do, you know, and so I think to all of your questions, there's also another, I feel like I'm on a commercial tonight, but let me just share with you. Just found a great book by Pasi Sahlberg, who was really, you know, very famous educator in Finland, and he wrote a book called Let the Children Play, and it's all about outdoor learning, which I know is another one of our goal areas. So I did a heavy skim on the book the other night, and he talks in his book about how hard it is to do research, right, on particularly social and play skills, because we say they're important, we want kids to have more play, but then we say we want their test scores to be higher. And he said we create a dichotomy, particularly in our country, particularly in the United States, saying we want kids outside more, we want more playtime, we want more free time, but we want their test scores to be really good. And are those compatible
I would say
goals?
they are compatible and they're necessary for each other.
Yeah. Well,
I
and there's
would.
some research, right, that says
I have read
give
research,
more
which is why it was one of my
and,
goals,
and test
because
scores will get better.
It has proven that when they have that unstructured playtime, that creative balance of pretend and coming up with their own worlds, that it actually does improve their math and reading skills, and that's why it was one of my goals. So
No, it's And he talks about how there is no gold standard of research because you don't say to one group of kids, don't go outside and play, you all get to go outside and play.
Well, right,
and I'm
because
gonna
if you
check on
live, if you
5
live in the
years.
city, you might
Yeah,
not
right,
have
yeah.
that opportunity, and
Yeah.
that's, but there are ways to play. I think we can be creative no matter what our spaces are,
Yeah.
to give them a natural place.
I think we were talking just among our leadership team, I think our leadership team is in agreement, right? That we want, that's why some of our facilities work is, that's why we have the goals in our facilities plan that we have. We're trying to find more spaces for our kids to be
Isn't it
outside.
15, it's
more.
like 15 minutes per hour of outdoor play in Finland, in elementary schools, isn't
Yeah,
that right?
it's a
15
lot.
minutes, not per day,
Yes,
it's
it was like
15 per
15
hour.
minutes after every, hour of core instruction.
Right,
Yes,
right.
yeah, yeah.
And so which is like,
Yeah.
what, 5 times more
The
than
book is
India, right?
really fascinating. I'd be happy to share it, pass it around, or get copies for people.
Yeah, Finland's kind of a
yeah.
special place that way.
Yeah. But he's making a direct comparison to the United States in his book. I mean, that's his intention. So I know we could see now we could spend all evening together and just talk about education. No, I appreciate the conversation. I appreciate the understanding that this is, I think of education as complex work. The work you do as boards in terms of your governance of what I really believe is a great high quality educational system. But we want this. For the Board of Education, we want this for the community. We want people to have a shared understanding that things are going well. So I guess back to this, are we in the right target zone? Maybe that's, so it sounds like in the curricular area we are.
I just want to add the play, but
I play in the next one around the.
I know, I
Yeah.
actually do think it's heavily tied to curriculum and to their cognitive skills, and I can give research if you want it, but I think it belongs actually in multiple places. And it's a really good bang for your buck, in my opinion, educationally.
Well, I guess they're number 5, and I guess number 5 I think could be measurable. We can basically say we want to see
Right, however
percent.
many.
I would agree.
Yeah.
I would definitely agree.
And I guess my question is, we have a very sort of broad, a lot of goals here. Would it be possibly even better, sort of, to minimize our goals, shrink the goals, that we stick to only goals that are measurable, like finance, to like test scores, to something, and then have sort of our aspirations, put everything else under aspirations, under just a thought.
We could, I think the 4 goals is fine, because if you think about it, it's the 4 pillars that we're doing. And within every pillar, you've got to have your vision, and then you've got to have what you're actually doing. It's a multi-tiered approach. So there's a lot of words here, but it's really just 4 things.
Yeah.
So I agree with just about everything that's been said so far. I do think these need to be fleshed out a little bit, but I'd caution about getting too specific, because one of the biggest fears that I have is we don't have 15% growth year over year because of this test scores, whatever, and then back to what you were saying before, well, now I don't want people in my office because I got to write it up, and now I have 32, and now I have to do this, and now you guide kids towards tests, and then you forget about the intangible stuff, and that's where I think this gets really tricky of what, and I'd like to see what you guys actually put in of like, I like some of your just sort of like directionally specific, but not 40% or 20%, or like these directly measurable, because I would not want the staff to get the wrong impression
Yeah,
that
I don't know.
I have to hit
Maybe we
this
can
target.
listen to Andrew.
And
Well,
not-
and
seconds, 'cause
you're right,
talk
and I
about the,
think we already do
para-
some of the reporting. It's not and when I say it's reporting on where we're at, and my example, and we did this last year where we looked at the kids in the various tiers, and how many kids had gone in, how many went out, and how they were doing. And that is a sufficient, that is not the massive binder, but it is a sufficient report to know, okay, the multi-tiered system of support is working, we're doing it, we are providing services to the kids and helping the ones who need more help. And I think that we are doing some of what we're talking about. It's there. I don't think we need to
Yeah, so that's a really important
We don't
point.
need to
Yeah.
reinvent the wheel.
You're saying there's a balance there, basically,
There
and
is a
there's
balance.
we never want to be in a situation where Martha, it feels like she's sitting in her office doing busy work to fill out forms that are no one believes are important. We never want to be in
Or
that
to
situation.
try and
Never.
gather things just to support
And
some
we also, we don't want to create perverse incentives, like Linda said. We don't want to be able to worry about unintended consequences, So we always want to avoid that. But as Joel is sort of indicating, is that there are certain things that are important to measure. And if we don't measure them, it's very hard for us to say, are we actually doing better than we were last year?
But
So I think
what
that's.
Joel's saying is we are measuring a lot of these
Well, we are
things.
measuring some, but the question is, are we measuring, all?
True, but when we do that, and Angela looks at those numbers and says, well, something changed, and then you can look and say, okay,
Yeah.
well, here's a refinement
relative.
that's necessary. I think it's, every school year is a little bit different, so
So where I was going with that, I don't know enough about number 2. I wrote down a lot of comments you said, like the report cards and stuff like that. So that made more sense. So thank you for that. For like number 1, I'll just tell you, in my world, pilots.
Are you in district
So like
goal?
District 1 for number 1.
District goal 1?
So I know we piloted a science thing that a couple people reported out on, and we're going to expand that. So that technically is no longer a pilot, right? We're expanding it. So are we just going to continue
Sort
to
of,
pilots,
for
or?
those for the teachers that haven't done it, I might consider it a pilot. But
Well, it's an expansion, though.
Yeah,
The
it's
pilot was,
definitely
you determined it worked and you wanted to expand
expand,
it, so we might
yes.
just want to flesh that out a little bit more.
Right.
And then I'm just curious, for number 5, like, how do you view that one, Angela, with the testing? Because testing is fascinatingly difficult to do.
So I've thought a lot about just how we measure that type of thing, right? And there is a philosophical piece to this of, do you measure testing, do you measure standardized achievement by learning, which is looking at the growth of individual students, or do you measure it by attainment and who's reaching that proficiency level? And so I think that that's one of the things that has to be fleshed out also, is just, are we looking at growth, which my professional opinion is that's the better way to go, is how I feel. And you can ask, for every 5 educators you ask, you're going to probably get 5 different reasons why one or the other is better. But for me, I prefer to look at growth versus attainment, because you can have high numbers of attainment and still leave behind many other students who aren't attaining, and they're not growing either. So they're not learning, but hey, we're reaching that attainment level, so everybody thinks everything's fine. Where when you're looking at growth and looking at how our students are growing, then we're being accountable for all of our students. And we're looking at how all of our students are working towards an attainment level. So I think that we have to decide philosophically where we're going. Martha and I would have a conversation as we're looking at how to measure it on where we want to go as leaders of the district, whether it is through growth or attainment. I think that we can set some numbers, but the other thing that needs to happen is that to set realistic numbers that are a stretch but attainable, because we don't want to set something that's not reachable, but we also don't want to set some low goal just because we want to reach
just
it.
to make it, yeah.
Right. To do that, I need to continue to look at our trends to see how have we been doing in the past, to then determine what is a stretch but attainable. So that would definitely be one that we need to come back to.
Do we want to specify growth from fall to spring? We do a winter test, and I will tell you, my own daughter goes like this. She actually raises in the fall and drops in the winter. I have no idea why, and then pops right back up. And it's very strange. So the question is, how do you look at growth? Is it seasonal? Is it from beginning to end? And what percentage do you want to talk about? Because none of the teachers could ever explain what's going on there. And it varies from year to year. And even for different years, there would be all these different growth trends, and we couldn't figure it out. And so that's a big question for me.
And also that goes right to our NWA map testing, right? So there's also the IAR, which was the PARC. The state is trying, and the state report card that will be released, they are trying to look at this growth phenomenon, right? They're trying to say, did you get better? Not just put kids at high levels of proficiency or high levels of attainment, which is one of our goals, but our goal is, of course, children all need to grow for us to get there. For us to get the greatest number of children that we can get there, we want to get there, right? But we know that there are children that come into school with tremendous struggles, and we spend a lot of time, money, effort, right, to make sure children have all those opportunities, all those supports. It's why we employ reading specialists and math interventionists and special education teachers.
Gets to the multi-tiered system.
Yeah,
I mean, you're
right.
trying to...
So both are important, and there are some ways that are built into the system. So next month you will look at some analysis of our MAP scores and of our IAR scores.
And is IAR going to be consistent again this year?
Yes,
Okay,
as of
thank-
right now, they
thank
have
you.
not changed it.
Well, as of, I always want to ask her that because I don't know.
The administration coming up in the spring, or what the
Administration
scores we're going to
coming
look
up,
at?
'cause I always ask, well, what are we
Yeah.
dealing with this year because it's changed so
We have a new
often.
state superintendent who's very interested in improving the assessment system, which means
Okay.
changing
No, I
it,
mean,
so.
I think.
I do think we can come up with something sensible, though, that's not too far of a reach, but it's
Yeah.
reasonable.
Right, and I think, I agree with what you said, Angela, that it's important that all students show growth. We don't want any students that, even if they're doing well, are sort of just not growing. We don't want students that are languishing, to, even, if- we sort of would like ideally to have high growth and high achievement, right? That's kind of what the goal should be, ideally for us. I would say that just on a technical note, these two things are not so different. I mean, growth is really just the change in achievement from one year to the next. So it's not like, so if you know the achievement numbers every year, you know the growth numbers. They're kind of linked one's the derivative of the other. So they're not so different.
Although it's the fluctuations that confuse me, why
It
the
is, yeah.
students go through that, yeah.
But I do think it's important to have strong numbers on both. That should be as a district, we should have good achievement and strong growth.
And I will say, having taught during the No Child Left Behind era, where it was actually, I would teach an honors class, and they would say you would need to have 100% growth for your entire class. And they're already at the 99th percentile. What do you do with them? So for our high achieving students, what does that mean? But we certainly can have each child grow. It's just a matter of for proficiency, what do we want?
But I guess, as I'm thinking about this, but I guess to Angela's point, we want the students to grow, but then how do we, because we've had this discussion before, are test results even something that we should be, we test a lot, are we teaching there's been obviously a number of discussions, like, do we teach the test?
I don't think we can teach the test. We don't know what the test is, so it can't be taught to. So if you
I'm gonna let the educators, but I have a brother who's an educator, and he says you can't teach those tests.
You can.
You can't teach those tests. Now, are you asking him, like, is 1 + 1 2 because that's going to be on a test? No, but you do. It's just we have all these tests, we have all these things. Should we maybe be just focusing on, like, maybe the math? That seems to be universally accepted. And I guess I do have a question. This is possibly all. Does that company that you did a nice pitch for?
I hope they aren't watching, or if they are,
Yeah,
they're
no.
going to be calling me tomorrow. But
No, do they do research based of these tests to see how effective these tests are? Because I sometimes even question, given especially the PARC, now the IRR, as it goes through this evolution process, do they even do any research to say, are these tests even like good tests?
So they tend to be more sort of what I would say program specific, at least what they've shared so far. So so you're looking to improve your reading scores. We're going to help you analyze, sort of best ways, that have your methods matched your the growth that you're seeing. I haven't seen, they publish sort of their topic areas. I haven't seen one like an analysis of IAR specifically or something like
See,
that.
'cause that's always just sort of, and I know I'm getting off topic here, but that's always been my interest. Like, how do we know that these tests are actually even
Yes,
valid
like
measures?
NWEA is a very long-standing, highly professional organization of very accomplished, people who study testing, professionally. So I'm guessing that if that's not adequate, then there's not going to be anything that's adequate. It's my sense.
Yeah, and I think Dave's talking about the IAR and you're talking about the MAP test.
Well,
So,
I think the IAR, I don't
I'm not
know
talking
as
the
much
math
about
test,
it,
because I do,
but
I'm talking the IR just because it seems to always evolve.
they're less sure, but again, they seem to be highly correlated with, in terms of schools that, you expect to do well, do well. So it does seem to be, there's definitely a signal in the noise. If it were a poor test, you wouldn't see that.
So to take us back to that number 5, I think there's a question, do you want to set a sort of a percentage target essentially, or do you want to, like we say, continue to demonstrate student growth on standardized assessments, naming both MAP and IAR?
Honestly, I'd rather go with what Angela said, which is where are we coming from and where should we be going?
Because
I mean, looking at, like you said, looking at what was performance last year, what was it before, how do we even compare the PARC results and that attainment to what IAR is now going to show.
May I add one thing? I added in my goal that it was at all 5 schools, which I think is one of the discrepancies that we're dealing with, a small school issue, and that might help us figure out that we're at least trying at each school to show growth. And I know that seems redundant, but it's actually really important that
No,
we're
I
not
get your point on
forgetting
that.
them. Yeah, I just thought that might be a way for us to figure out where we were and where we're going, because we know what their results were by school.
I guess maybe if I can be so bold as to say, maybe can we take the entire standardized assessment growth out and just focus on student growth and not measure it by standardized assessments?
I wouldn't take it out.
I don't know that I would agree with that either.
I think it's unfortunately, there are mandated things and we need to be a part of that. Whether we agree with them or not, I personally, we need to be a part of that process, and I'm not a big, I'll just say this, I'm not a big fan of giving a specific percentage to what we want to grow or attain. We are a high achieving district who has shown growth. So I don't think that's something we need to focus on. I think it's something we clearly do focus on, that we always want our kids to grow and our attainment.
Yeah, and Meryl
I don't
would give
think we
us
need to set a
little
percentage because I don't think we're
targets.
struggling. I would feel more comfortable setting that percentage if we were like, gosh, we just can't get somewhere. We need to hit this target. So for me, I'm a little uncomfortable with the
That would be-
percentages.
And
I
that's
would-
why I'm actually putting it to Angela to look at what we've done
I think
in the
Angela
past
can give
and
us
seeing what's
something.
attainable, what's a little bit of a stretch, where should
Yeah,
we?
I still, for me, I'm one of 7, so we'll do what we do, but.
Right, and
I'm comfortable with
I'm hesitant to put numbers on there too, but not for the reason you attribute. Your argument is that we're doing okay and we don't really need it. We're not struggling.
that. That's not exactly my argument, but.
What was your argument? Sorry, I missed.
No, go ahead first.
No, what was your?
Go ahead. Finish what you were saying.
My hesitation is that I don't know that it works. For example, the high school had a goal.
Right,
They
that's-
said, let's have the ACT
Right,
at
that's exactly
26.
what I'm thinking.
It's like been 10 years since they had that goal, and it's gone down to anything. So I'm not sure it works. But the argument to make on the plus side is that we know that there are a significant fraction of our students that are not achieving what are the minimum sort of standards on the state test. And my strong suspicion is that a significant fraction of that cohort, is 40% or whatever, 35%, could be meeting expectations if we did something differently. What that different thing is, I don't know. But there is, so I don't think we are firing on all possible cylinders. And that's having an aspirational goal saying we should be getting not 60% or 70%, we should be getting 80% or 85%. Is kind of why I'm attracted to it, but at the same time, I know just putting a number out there is in itself seems ineffective.
I
so.
know remember Meryl would give us a presentation, and she struggled with that too, like, we're at the 60 whatever, we're at the 70, and she would say, these districts are at 80 whatever, and I wouldn't mind like a close target range. And I don't necessarily need a specific.
Hard
but
numbers do seem arbitrary, absolutely.
Something for us to
So for
attain.
example, like MAP, you can purchase what they call a virtual comparison.
Yeah.
They will kind of create a Riverside, like they'll take a demographic, a socioeconomic, a prior score bank, and they'll give you this virtual comparison. You buy it, right? You buy extra data comparison. That's how you set, like for districts that really want to set those targets, right? You say, well, given all of this, we ought to be, oh wow, we're much better than we ought to be. I mean.
Well, that's not something we
But-
purchase currently.
See,
Not something we're
I think we can do that on our own by looking at our surrounding
trending.
communities, and you can mentally say, well, I know about what the demographics of our surrounding communities are and the whiskey group, and so we're about where we should be.
It's setting a low bar. I think that's what we do. We do that, and we sort of say, yeah, compared to these other schools we're doing, we're in line. We're kind of where we should be. But I still believe at some level that we could be, that the great majority of students, there's always going to be some fraction that have, severe learning disabilities, or they don't test well because they're nervous or whatever reason. We're never going to be 100% that are meeting expectations. But I do believe it could be higher than it is, substantially higher than it is. But when looking at other districts is not the answer, because they're not doing any better than we are. So it's got to be more fundamental, which is a fundamental change, which I think is part of the reason why one of my suggestions was to be really, really, really focused on research, and from the top to the bottom, and figure out what can we be doing differently.
I like that. I liked his goal where we're kind of searching and developing strategies that we think
And maybe
might
it's in
work for us.
collaboration with one of these groups.
Yeah,
they
maybe
have
the
got some-
company
I
helps
mean,
us.
this is this question, what accelerates student learning the most,
Yeah,
right? That's really what
exactly.
you're saying.
Exactly.
And it's kind of this,
Right.
like, thick question in education, if we knew exactly what it was, and what we know is it's a combination of
Well, right,
things.
I don't need
Yeah, right.
it's this.
Yeah,
What I need
yeah.
is it's this. It's
There
a
might be
basket
10 different
thing.
things
It's all
to
these
do.
things.
Right.
And
I
are we
wouldn't
doing all
mind
those
putting
things?
some
Yeah.
more things in our basket.
And Jeff,
But-
I like you, I guess, I agree with you. I mean, what can we, but I guess the thing is, going back to the medical analogy, like this drug trial, go through a certain process.
Yes.
It's like a specific company, like a specific, like a part of a research university that goes through and does that, and then they pass that on to,
Yeah.
like, the practitioners. We're the practitioners.
Right.
We necessarily can't do all
Well,
that.
I'm not proposing we do randomized control. What I'm proposing is that we do a very systematic study of what, read all those randomized control, and not just, one-offs, but read the whole literature and make that as part of the practice of the district, that we are totally on top of everything that's been sort of done in educational research. What's that?
Who's the leader?
And Linda's like, how much reading are we talking?
Martha and Angela.
Making sure.
But I could spend my day
Right.
reading research and measuring progress toward goals, right? And I feel like my job is different than that. My job as a
Yeah.
practitioner is to support the principals, to make sure that great things are going on, to confer with teachers, to confer with Jim around our financial outlook. So it's,
Right, so you've
My
got a lot
job
of
is
stuff.
different.
No, I'm saying,
Yeah.
see, you're probably not the right person to be doing it, because you have other responsibilities.
but-
I was gonna say, I don't.
But see, but-
I'm saying neither am I.
Right, but I guess that's, and that's, I
I
guess
was gonna say,
Right.
I was gonna say,
Right.
a lot of what you're saying, I feel is something they already do inherently in their work. Like, I know most people do. You keep up on best practices, you read the new research that's coming
Right.
out. So what you're saying, I don't think is completely different from what they already do, but besides doing a complete focus on it.
Right.
I think
mean,
we do hear a lot of new initiatives, but we don't always hear why they're doing them.
So
other
maybe
than
that's
we
just-
hear a lot of like so-and-so's doing
Yeah.
it, and so-and-so's doing
Right.
it, and I heard it at a conference, or it'd be nice to have that research.
I will tell you through this conversation, I am more and more intrigued by this kind of ancillary partner organization who really, that's what they do. You hire people to read the research, to digest it and distill it for you, and to then match it up with your goals and your programs and evaluate your own successes.
We're at the same conference talking.
Yeah.
To Linda's point, I mean,
Yeah.
there was this study that came out, and you guys might have seen it. A couple of researchers basically did a meta-analysis of 140 randomized controlled trials in education in the U.S. and Great Britain. So this is the set of basically the best research that's been done in the history of education, because pre-registered, randomized controlled, large trials, all of them sort of showed promising results in initial bets. So they're very expensive to do these, very expensive. So 140 trials, and I guess I'm doubtful that Martha or Angela has had the time to read these 140 the trials. But you're right. Maybe some other organization that has read these and said, hey, there are 10 things that look promising. Parenthetically, it's interesting that of these 140, the effect size, can you guess what the average effect size was on this 140 set? So effect size of 0.2 is quite a good effect size.
Right.
Guess what the average was for this promising set? These are promising random. These are not like just random stuff. These are
Is this all the John Hattie stuff?
no. This
Okay.
John Hattie wouldn't qualify because his stuff wouldn't qualify. This not. The average effect was 0.03, which is basically zero. It was basically zero. So basically, when people put all of these good ideas that had initial promising results to the test, on average, they showed no effect, which is part of the reason that I think we really have to be very systematic about what we're doing and make sure that it's actually supported by solid research.
but if you're saying this study is showing no effect, then is there any studies?
There's 100 of the 140, the average of the 140.
Yeah,
So some
yeah,
did
yeah.
and some didn't.
Yeah.
But even the ones that did, you might say, well, maybe that's just a chance. Has it been replicated? So you actually, it requires a lot of intensive labor. But I think it's possible to do that, and I think that's the only way that we're going to make progress above and beyond what Joel was saying, that our comparison groups. Well, we can all certainly stay in line with everyone else, and that's not hard to do, I think. But can we actually move the needle to be truly exceptional And I think that's only if we are totally disciplined on the research side.
Are you talking just in like academic categories, like truly exceptional? You know what I mean, like?
Yeah, I'm mostly talking about.
Just take it back to the earlier conversation.
Yeah,
What
yeah,
about
yeah.
play? What if play's the thing, right? What if play is the thing?
I'm in favor of that.
Because that's where I have, you know, like
What if it's not about math and reading at all?
Research
Oh, well,
and-
I totally support play.
I don't want to bring the discussion to I don't want to bring the discussion to a halt, but I will note right here, we're at 8:09.
Maybe we could move on to,
Well,
Are we in the right target zone on the educational goals?
my only question
Right.
is, I looked at the past goals too, there's nothing about physical education. Was that deliberate or?
So, nothing about physical education probably was deliberate, but so, are you talking about play or are you talking about physical education?
I'm talking
We did
about
have those
District
new
Goal
standards.
1, and is
Yeah.
the PE and activity and,
From the strategic plan?
right.
I think we
I
did
think it was one that was resolved like the first year, but let me look
Yes.
back at it,
We
yeah.
did have those new PE standards
Yes.
that we heard about last year, so that might be why it's not on.
So to me, that should
this year.
be just a continue item.
But then eventually, we're gonna get to a point where
Dropping out.
everything's a continue item.
Right.
Yeah,
I
like
think that's-
some dropped off, like the one about foreign language, the one
Yeah.
about advanced
Well,
learning, we
and
dropped those
Right,
off
right,
because,
right,
right.
yeah, so I believe the PE one was dropped
I
off
think
the
that
first
was- I
year
think-
because they had to align,
Yeah,
to
they
align to the
had to align
standards,
to
they had to
these,
create the
yeah. Yes.
teacher-directed
I
PE
definitely
to have,
remember
to
that.
meet the appropriate minutes, yeah.
When we went through strategic planning, we were at a point where like
Right.
almost all of our curriculum was not up to standard. So a
Yes.
lot of it was getting to
Right.
standards and how
Right.
that, and then we all know that curriculum standards
Right.
change every 4 or 5 years. So
Right.
in 4 years, that PE one's gonna be back on that
Right.
action
Which
plan
is why
because
we're doing
gonna have to change it.
Well, we
Right.
dealt with social studies last year,
Right.
and now
Yeah.
science is
Yeah.
continuing.
Right, and
Yeah.
it's gonna be a
There is
continual
cycle,
process
and you
of.
will
Yeah.
see more cycles
Yeah.
as the state
What's the new
decides.
standard? What do we
Yes.
need to get there? It's gonna be every year.
Yeah,
those are
PE
gonna
was
be
dropped off
cycling through.
intentionally,
Yeah.
Quest was dropped off intentionally, EL bilingual programs were dropped off intentionally, because that work was
done.
completed. Those, the K-8 foreign language analysis, yeah.
So I guess it's a soft measurement. If we don't see it, that's a good way for
Right,
us to
right.
understand.
And
that
you
most
did have
likely-
reports on the sort of progress toward those goals
Yeah.
as part of committee of the whole, yeah.
Yeah.
But thank you for bringing that back into focus, because, right, some things are intentionally not from the strategic plan into annual goals.
How about goal 2?
Well, before we leave, do we have, and Martha, do you feel comfortable with the discussion? Is that enough
Yeah,
to
is there
move
anything
forward with?
that's missing from there?
Play.
Play, but so I think play's down.
No,
I said that earlier.
Under
I know, I
whole
said,
child.
but it's not under curriculum, and it really should be, and that's what the research says. So I do have a sticking point with that, because it's not just about the whole child. It is, but it isn't. It's also integrally related to the brain function and how they learn.
I don't disagree with you at all. I
I'm
just think
just
it's
saying
already on the plan, so I
If
For me,
it's
I just
addressed,
think
It's in the
Jeff.
wrong
Under goal
pla- for me,
2,
it's-
under whole child.
It's not in the right place
Yeah.
everywhere it should be. That's all I'm saying.
Sounds like that brings us to goal 2. But seriously though, before we
Yes, we're
leave
good.
goal 1, are we good on
Yeah,
that?
let's move.
Yeah.
All right, let's move. Okay, so goal 2, the culture and climate.
So culture and climate, from the strategic plan, to me, sort of identified 2 key areas. One was a lot about communication, which I think was about trust with the community and that kind
At
of
the
thing.
time, that was really
Yeah.
needed.
Yeah, and I think it's very important ongoing,
Well,
so
and now, yeah.
I have those 2 action plan areas that are listed.
Nope.
So I do a monthly communication, trying to change that. I feel like I spent 3 years sort of writing almost like a friendly letter to the community, letting them know that I was a real person that cared about education and their children and the well-being of our schools. I feel like, real honestly, it's gotten a little stale for me. I'm like, I can only say I think so highly of you so many
Do
times,
people
so
ever
I.
come to your coffee, your open office hours?
One.
One, that's all?
In 3
One
years,
person?
one. Well,
I was-
with their spouse, so 2 people
I was
came.
hoping that would be
Wow.
more utilized. Okay.
No.
But I like that you offered that. I thought that was really.
Yeah, and it's still offered in my, I just sent out a monthly communication. I will continue with a monthly communication. I'm kind of playing around with format, gathering some additional ideas if you gathered that. The community report, the annual report was something that this board agreed to do back in 2015, 2016. I think that's a nice document, a sort of an ongoing,
I think people appreciate
yeah,
it.
I didn't hear a word about it this year, but, you know, you all
think
got it in your mailboxes, I assume?
Yeah.
So there's kind of that communication, family connection part of culture and climate, and then there's the culture and climate in the schools. And we talked about reviewing and refining practices that promote a culture of inclusivity and support for all learners. This is where I put the outdoor learning, improve outdoor learning spaces for elementary school students that promote play, student health, and appreciation for the natural environment, and then a later start time for Hauser. Those are things that have been sort of talked about. Those are things that are embedded in some of the why behind our long-range facilities planning. So again, there may be more. I'm not opposed to moving the, David, I think were you the one who said maybe there should be like one big audacious goal that encompasses all of this, that, kids will do great and learn more and be happier in school, which somehow is about all of this.
Actually, I think that's that first intro statement in the long-range plan is.
Well, it's kind of our mission statement.
That's our
Yeah, it
mission
is.
statement.
That's why we have the
That is
mission
the audacious
Yeah,
goal.
right. Yeah.
Well, my daughter will definitely like the third one, so.
What the Hauser?
Well, later start time.
I mean, that's part of the plan, right?
Right.
I mean, that's where we're headed, so.
Right.
So I think just from fitting with the theme that I've been hearing of, if you're planning on continuing monthly communications just because that's part of how you're gonna communicate, and you're gonna do an annual plan because that's part of how we communicate, do they really need to be in here as a goal, or are those just things that we do?
Right, that's a good question.
I think for me personally, the second one is probably more important, and in particular the first one, especially with all the stuff that's starting to come out in the community about things going on within Hauser.
Yes.
So specifically promote a culture of inclusivity and support for all learners, but I don't think it should be limited to middle school either. I think starting that from the very beginning of,
Oh, certainly.
don't be terrible to other people, and just you grow
Absolutely.
up in that environment, and then hopefully by the time they actually get to high school and they do encounter that, it's kind of like, what's going on here? And you feel more comfortable interjecting when people are not, respecting other people and stuff like that. So to me, I think just right now, it's what I've been hearing directly with, the people that I spend the most time with and just others and emails I've been getting through the community. Excuse me. I think to me that's probably a big one that we probably need to put a lot of focus on right now as a district and as a board to help you guys as an administration figure out what to do with that. I don't know how much it needs to be vetted out here, but I'm glad to see that's already in here because that was going to be one of the things that I was going to add for it.
I know the first one about the goal 2, number 1 about the communication strategies. I think even holding these forums and all of the facilities meetings, everything, I think that's all really nice and integral. I don't know if we have to say it, but I'm hoping that we continue that progress.
I mean, it
With
is that.
inviting people in and giving them information.
And again, we know, research talks about, if a family's engaged in the child's educational process, children will do better, right? So the intention, I know I felt when I came here, I feel a lot less now, I'm happy to say, is that the District 96 was not necessarily a trusted organization in the community, and I feel like that's grown and changed a lot. So I think, it is that outward communication, sharing a lot about what we're doing in the district, inviting families in, inviting community in. So, maybe that's a better way to have that goal, is sort of, again, continue to sort of explore and implement kind of family engagement.
I do think they come straight from 4 years ago when those things were lacking, and that has improved. So you're right, it doesn't need to be.
Yeah, if those are just operational, that's one of the things we talk about, if we're just doing that.
Although, I still think we should check on those new families, and not just the kindergarten or the pre-K, but the new families that might be joining us. Do we have a place for them to feel engaged and supported, or are they kind of shuffled in through the mix? I know we do the parent night and everything, which is nice, but it might be nice to have something for those new families.
Perhaps it's included in here as well, but should there be anything about taking advantage of new communication platforms or new technology? Because that's definitely always changing. If we look back 4 years ago, things have greatly changed since
And I still don't think we've found the best way to reach the entire community. I still think that eludes us. So I do think something like that still needs to be on there, because I think that's something we're always.
Holograms are coming.
We have a good way of reaching our parent community. We don't really have a way of reaching our larger community.
So maybe that needs to evolve a little bit around kind of general communication and not just a repeat of like, yes, I will continue with the monthly communication unless the board thinks I shouldn't be, you know, but,
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
And not to do
No.
it just to do it, but to your point, like the town halls and stuff like that, or just the feedback forums. I mean, now the facilities thing is obviously a very big thing that a lot of people
Right.
care about, but you had tremendous attendance. I was actually surprised. I only got to go to the one, but I think you said each one, you went to all of them, right? Like, there was quite a few people
Yeah.
at each one, so that was surprising. So I don't know if you just said, hey, come out and talk to us.
Right.
For some random reason is really
it
worth
tends to be
but-
pertinent issues that bring people in.
Yeah.
So facilities is big.
But keeping that in mind
Yeah.
as other things pop up, that I don't know if that
Yeah.
needs to be a goal necessarily.
Yeah, I know, I
but-
felt that too. I don't know if it needs to be a goal, but it's,
But it's also nice, like, at the end of the year when these things are being reported on, like, sometimes to have, to keep something in that effect so that we can hear
Yeah.
and document,
Yeah.
these are all the ways we've been communicating, these are the platforms
Yeah.
we've been looking at, you know, like,
Right.
I still like having it, something, I'm not saying it's the exact 2 action plans, but something that is, you know, that we can report on.
Well, maybe what we could maybe do is also maybe add, the annual report's good, but maybe like have a committee of the whole meeting where we just sort of do a state of this, state of the
Yeah.
district.
Sure, absolutely.
Which I think would make this whole process a
Right.
much more linear process. Like,
Mhm, I
end of the
agree.
year,
Right.
maybe it's July, who knows? Maybe it's one of those times where you have like a review
Right.
as we lead into creating this again, and then it just feels like a much more linear, like, you know, as opposed to
Right.
like, oh, we're here again, and these all feel like the same ones as last year, and we don't, you
Yeah.
know.
One thing I was gonna suggest at the end, but maybe it fits here, is doing, like, a lot of people said an annual report, and that's actually one thing that was really difficult for me. I went back and I looked at 4 years, and I'm like, okay, but what has actually happened? Because I've not been involved for the last 4 years. But if you only look at things at the end of the year, then you can wildly miss your objectives.
Yeah.
So I was actually, as I was thinking through these, I was wondering, okay, I'm trying to think back to either these meetings that I watched, not being on the board, or ones that were here, and it's like, okay, did we actually tie those presentations or those discussions back to goals to make sure that we're actually staying on track for goals? So maybe like some sort of regular 3 times a year or something, we just do like a report out, maybe that would be worthwhile.
yeah, that usually happens, I know, at least for committees, we try in the fall to say, you know, what is it that we want to tie it back to, and what do we want to cover, just so we have a plan. And then we usually get an end of the year, kind of put everything back together. Maybe we need something about how did it relate to the strategic plan, and let's see where it came from, or something more specific.
Or even real time, like, hey, this, I'm thinking like the pilot, the science pilots or something. I mean, it might be kind of obvious, but for those that aren't following along
Right.
as much, it's
For
like,
us, it'll be obvious.
this happened
Right.
because this was part of
And
this
as you
goal.
remember,
just-
we're doing this because our goals.
And
are
those,
to do
yeah, and those
that.
tend to drive some of
Whenever you say that
the
a couple
committee
times, too.
presentations that
Yeah.
then are planned for Cal meetings, but thinking about how those pieces tie together, I recall my first year here, we did kind of a revisit of the strategic plan. We invited people that had been on the planning to come back for more discussion. It was interesting, and then the next year we decided to do more of a share out, and I think we had like 2 people attend, if you recall. It was a very small number, so. But it was before the facilities work had really started more in earnest, and I think it was at a time when things were,
The hard part is getting people to come, and
Yeah.
everything is just,
Good.
people are busy, people in
Right.
in K-8 schools have little kids, so yeah, it's hard. But to think about sort of a state of the district, you know, some kind of goal share, even if we decide through committee of the whole that 3 times a year we can all really tie back to the goals. I mean, it's all very doable, I think.
As long as we're not, if that's not too ambitious and we're not losing too much as a
Yeah.
result,
Yeah,
and I'm willing to be told we are or we're not.
it's hard to say right now, not having sort
I
of.
think it's instead of just saying 3 times a year, it's more like as presentations are going on, making a
where did it
mention
come
of
from?
Yeah.
Right.
reflecting back to this. You know, like
I would think
we're
most-
talking about
yeah.
this because at the beginning of the year, these were our goals, and this
Yeah.
ties in with goals. You know, I don't
I think
think
we
we
do
need.
want to give
And then this is
administrators,
filled
you
out by
know.
the-
Yeah, so maybe
do
this
wanna
is a
give-
document that appears on the agenda quite a bit, just
Yeah.
because it's going to be referenced, and so that So if I'm somebody who never pays attention, that day I look in and that, you know, could always just be on the agenda and, you know, things are tied to it.
I think as long as we give the administrators who are presenting an opportunity to say, oh, this is something new that just popped up or something that happened in the district, we want to talk about it. I want to give them
Oh,
some
absolutely.
leeway to have some flexibility.
Oh,
you know.
100%, yeah.
But I would tell you, like, the presentations that I'm sure happened around the PE standards, that happened around the advanced learning, that happened around kind of
All
an
tied
audit of the
back.
bilingual program, all were linked to
Because of
those
this.
goals, yeah.
And they all link back to the state and
Yeah,
all of that, so.
yeah. So what about the outdoor learning? And I say for elementary schools because our facilities plan is about designing for the elementary schools. It doesn't mean that we don't want Hauser to have outdoor opportunities.
Well, and that item could easily, it fits both to Sherry's curriculum item, but it also goes to facilities as well.
Yes,
So-
it does, yeah.
What was your question about?
Where people would prefer in terms of which goal area it belongs
Oh.
under, because I agree, it could go under
There's
facilities, it could go
several
under
different
curriculum.
goals, yeah.
it-
Could
yeah.
be in several
I
different
mean,
places.
you're doing a facilities item, a project in order to attain or make possible
Right.
something
I
on
think I agree with that.
the curriculum side.
Okay.
So, where, would-
I
I
don't
think
have-
right now it
I don't
goes to
think it matters.
facilities simply because we haven't done it yet. We're not there. We're in progress of figuring out how to improve those spaces.
Why is it moving from culture and climate, though? Culture and climate's already kind of sparse.
it is really all of them. I mean,
It's also interconnected, I just
It-
don't.
I agree, it is
I kinda look at the whole
interconnected.
child,
But I guess
though.
this.
I like that aspect of it as well.
Yeah.
It is interconnected, I
think I'll
agree
leave it.
completely.
I'd like to leave it, I don't know about you guys.
I guess the thing is though, not to get too philosophical, but all this stuff is sort of interconnected and just.
Oh, absolutely.
And just because it's, I don't have an issue with it being quote unquote sparse, because it's really not, because it's all interconnected. And I guess,
Mhm.
I don't think we need to have a goal just to have.
I agree with you completely. I'm thinking of it purely in terms of aesthetics, terms of how it would look as people from outside are looking in on it.
Bigger font,
Do things, are things imbalanced?
Yeah.
and you
Or
wouldn't want
things
people
to look like
thinking
they're not
we-
getting
And will
enough
it- and will it
attention.
be accomplished, you know,
Mhm.
if it gets stuck at the bottom of, you know.
Sure,
someplace,
sure.
So in this, independent of what category we put the goal in terms of the outdoor learning space, I know we'll be talking a lot about that in the next year at Ames and at Hollywood and Central and Hauser. One of the things I think, and this is my view, I don't know to what degree other people share this, is that it's important that kids, and it's very rare nowadays for kids to actually spend a lot of time in a natural setting. So a lot of like urban playgrounds are, like our current playgrounds are, they're asphalt and to me, I think that there's some evidence, and it's not very strong, that just spending time in the natural setting where there are trees and, different, textures and things is actually important for, improving mental health. People who walk in the woods and that sort of thing, they sort of find that they're happier. And so I just wonder, should we refine this goal to talk about not just appreciating the natural environment, but actually incorporating in the play spaces a naturalistic, at least some of it to be a naturalistic setting?
I think yes.
I think yes. I would say yes, but I think how practical is that where we are?
To the extent possible, as always.
Right, I know of many districts that have natural materials.
Is
It could
that,
be materials. it could
are
be-
we treading too much into,
We're probably treading into too much detail on that.
That
So-
could be, but as I know there'll be plans will be coming back for playgrounds soon, and I guess I.
So, what, and I had shared this just in a communication that next I'm asking DLA to bring us an MOU for playground, because there's a site design issue, right, that has to happen. We have to know exactly where it's going to occur, and we're going to need to make decisions about surfaces. I have been doing some informal sort of research on playgrounds with this idea of a naturalistic playground, and what does that mean, right? So there's some schools that would describe they have a naturalistic playground, and they still have some synthetic surfaces, and they still have some cutout areas for trees and bushes and native grasses and small streams. You know, I mean, so there are ways, right?
Right.
Because one of the interesting things about playgrounds is that they have to be usable in as many kind of weather conditions as possible, right? So, like the Hauser PE team, and we're going to have this focus group, and they're going to have more opportunity to talk to the landscape architect and the engineers, but they would tell you that that is so frequently non-usable because once it gets wet, so even the day after a good rain, when it might be a nice day, they don't go use it because it's mud. And
Well, that was a very specific comment
Yeah.
that Mr. Harvey.
yeah, Mr. Harvey, right.
Mr.
Yeah.
Harvey mentioned is
Right.
that, and that's something that we have to think about when
Right.
we propose a outdoor space, is it usable and maintainable and,
My sense about playgrounds is there's a way to be a hybrid. There's a way to make things very natural. It uses many plantings and
That's what I was
trees
gonna say,
and make surfaces, you know, permeable.
Like, I think what you're saying is like, do we have a board goal and commitment to have a, you know, not just a slab of asphalt and a,
Right.
you know.
That's my hope.
And I do think, I mean, while I might disagree or just have a different vision than you might, I definitely think of a blended, you know, something that incorporates everything. Like asphalt's still
You want to have
fun
a
to play kickball
basketball,
on.
right, a basketball
Or, you
area,
know,
and I
or
agree. I'm not saying 100%.
grass is fun, except synthetic surf is usable.
Yeah.
You know, like there's
Right, no, I
lots
agree.
of-
I'm not saying it'd be all
Yeah.
like a wooded
There
area,
should
but I
be
do
some
think having a wooded
opportunity.
area where there's big trees and there's some grasses where kids can just go and sit under a tree, you know, that's like, that could be great because a lot of kids don't have that option, you know?
I think, yeah, I don't really know how, I don't know if I would change the wording or anything, but I would be more a proponent of a
Feels like that
blended.
is getting more into facilities though, like what
Yeah.
the design actually looks like.
Yeah.
You got, you know,
Yeah.
We could add a goal under the facilities
Yeah.
that talks about something like you know, create playground design that will, you know, so we could have it sort of both places. I mean, the reason we talk about play and outdoor learning is kind of that social emotional part,
Right.
climate and
And
culture
that's
for
how I
kids, and then
think
there's
to
the
write it.
build the right playground too, you know, find the right
Yeah.
space and build it. And I don't mean just playground. so-
Because really, under facilities, one of the action plans is looking at our outdoor space at Hauser
Yeah.
Central and figuring that
Yeah,
out.
right.
Looking at, you know, creating a playground, not committee, but you know, whatever the group is going to be called to figure out
Another
what-
plug, next Tuesday morning, is it next Tuesday? Is it October 8th? Yes, so we're inviting parents in, so I think people receive that in the monthly communication, come and be part of a focus group. And teachers are participating, students are participating, so it's a fully scheduled day, but I'm looking forward to it. I think there's gonna be some great conversations with lots of people, staff, students, families, so it'll be great.
So I almost, getting back to that, I almost think like under the facilities, those could be action plans, because they are actually things we're doing this year that we're gonna want to report out and, you know.
Well, okay, so it sounds like, are we moving on
To
to?
goal 3?
Goal 3, or is there
Yep.
more discussion for goal 2?
yeah.
Is everybody good on goal 2? Martha, you
Yep,
good?
I am.
Okay,
Yeah, thanks.
fantastic. All right, at the sound of the tone, it will be 8:32.
Do you have an end time here?
says 8:30 on the agenda.
Okay. Sorry, we have 2 goals, guys.
We're gonna make that
end
Kentucky,
time.
so don't worry. We're good.
Okay, so for goal 3, facilities.
Optimize and reconfigure existing spaces to address the needs of the school district. So that was exactly how it was in the strategic plan. That is very much, I think there's been a lot of action around that one in the past couple of years. We're getting closer and closer to final steps and actual implementation. I do believe implementation is the appropriate goal for
Yeah.
this school year.
Yeah.
So
Dan, I liked what you added though, because that was one thing I was thinking about too, is the goal of making sure that as we start this construction process, that the intrusion to
Yeah.
students is minimal as possible, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, it looks like a lot of what I said is kind of lumped into one under finance, and I think there are aspects that could be included in both, but I do think it is important when something as specific as a construction project is, you know, on our doorstep, it's right here. I don't know that we have all that many specific dates yet, but as we get them,
Yeah.
that's something, you know, we really need to adhere to ourselves not only to the construction manager, to the construction companies, but that we're looking at our own performance on that in terms of, are we adhering to
The
dates, are
proposal
we
is
adhering to
to
costs?
basically just add a line that says, to make sure that our projects are on time and on budget.
Yes,
I like.
Is that what you're-
what you
is that what you're
wrote,
proposing?
both of
Yes,
them.
that's it, essentially.
So like there's the one here under goal 3, under implement the identified components of the long-range facility plan, manage planned construction projects to completion with minimal intrusion to student, staff, and learning. And then there's something under finance, balance construction spending for improving learning environments with overall cost to the district. And that's one where I actually put an or under finance number 3, because I thought there was good language in both of those.
I think going to the finance item, when I was reading through this, I was wanting to add some of the things that Dan had said, and they just were further down the list. And I think it goes back to we're looking at the district as a whole.
Right,
It's
right.
sometimes hard to break it out into a
Right,
specific.
it becomes a little artificial.
So, but are we in agreement with Dan's specific proposal about on time and on budget? That's not in here now, is it?
Under facilities or under finance?
It's
Where
under
I-
finance, it's just kind of
Why-
stated in a longer way. I would, number
Yeah,
3,
I
I
was
would
gonna
almost,
wordsmith
Maybe edit that down and,
yeah.
Yeah,
I think that,
that could
I'd
be
move it to
split a little bit and
facilities.
added to
Yeah.
each section.
right,
Right.
I think something as simple as
like what
keep
Dan has.
projects on time and on
On budget,
budget.
yeah.
Like literally
Period.
just that.
That's it. I agree.
No, I
I
agree.
agree.
Is
It's
that-
very measurable.
I like Dan's second.
Yeah, no, and it is very clear. It is very clear. That is.
Under facilities,
Yeah.
or under finance, because there's,
Oh.
yeah,
It's
all right.
under both.
Finance.
Yeah, it is, there are some under both, yeah.
Yeah, I don't care where it's
You're
at. I think
using-
it's something that we
But I
need
think
to
that
commit
to be
to
clear
be.
and concise, I
Yeah.
agree. Because we want, once this ball starts rolling, we want to make sure that it actually gets where it's supposed to go on
Absolutely,
time.
on time and
Yeah,
within
on budget.
constraints,
Budget,
absolutely.
The other
And that's-
goal, oh, go ahead.
Very easy goal and one
Yeah.
that's very,
Very
can be
clear.
very specific to this and next year, like.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Yeah.
easier than others. I mean, in a corporate environment, you would build in a variance, a stated variance. Oftentimes, it's meaningless or arbitrary. I don't know if we wanted to do that here, or are we comfortable enough just saying on time, on budget?
Right now, I think that's
fine with
sufficient.
that. I
That's a
think we-
goal, and we,
I think we know there's going to be like fluctuation around it, just because that's the nature of the beast.
I
but-
like it because it's succinct and I think it's easy for people to.
And people know that that is our, we are, let's do it.
Okay.
So the on time, on budget part goes under facilities. The other one that, and Jim wanted to add more, the other one that's been sitting there is this, a multi-year operations and maintenance plan. And, I mean, that's obviously very important. We have, $1 million in our budget that we sort of hold for operations and maintenance. So this means making sure that we put our roofs on our building at times in the right years, that we budget this out appropriately, we plan this out, our boilers and our, some
Right, some of
unique
all the
projects.
predictable things especially,
Maintenance,
and
yeah.
then some contingencies, I guess, but there's things that you know are gonna come up, even if you can't pick the exact year.
it's the idea of keeping things in a state of good repair.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
That's-
And is that the better way to say, that,
Perhaps it is.
It could be.
Again,
Well,
I
this
think
is
this was
supports
written
doing
at a
that.
time when we didn't know if we had
Okay,
anything
because I was just
like.
gonna say, that to me just seems.
Like,
So operational.
like operational.
Day-to-day, yeah.
yeah.
Well,
But honestly,
But it's felt very important, and
I was gonna say,
right.
when we wrote that,
We had
we
no
weren't
idea
sure if that would
if they
exist.
were
But don't we
maintaining
sort of
that.
have something like that? Wasn't that the part of the
DLA provided.
DLA
Yeah,
is?
yeah.
We're
That's what I'm
working
saying.
Right,
from
right, so we
that.
have, we at
Right,
least have a
yeah.
set of projects.
Yeah, and we've done it
Yeah.
probably in different ways. The different directors of finance may have done it somewhat differently, but I think, Jim has a good handle on what's
Yeah, so it's
needed,
really
what's
not
next,
something we need to
what things might
develop.
cost, so.
But I go sort of to what Wesley said. I mean,
I assumed that was being.
that's like sort
It better
of
be being
Well,
done.
salaries. You
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
it's like you,
Every day.
right, it's
Don't
every
hear
day
about
you
it,
have
it's
to
like,
do this,
Yeah.
so,
And work it in once a year to the long-range projections.
Right,
and
so-
Make sure we're on track.
I mean, if we want to keep it there, that's fine, but to me,
I
that
don't
just
think-
sort of, I don't think we need
That's-
that just because that's sort of,
But has it been
Either
done?
way,
I mean,
the
has
plan to do it,
Do you
so.
feel like it has been done though? I mean, because having the day-to-day stuff I agree with, but
Plan.
having
Yeah.
a 10-year plan with specific items, like we need to replace the boiler at Hauser by, the year
Yeah, and
2030.
everyday things.
That's not obvious, right? Unless we have actually a plan that knowing the lifetime of these different items and components, right?
Is that what you're referring to, I guess? Are you talking like the big ticket items, or are you
Well,
talking like?
the multi-year
Oh.
operations, I would say that. And then I'm working with the architects to update what we have from before I got here.
Okay.
And
See, I guess going along with what you said, Jeff, I mean, if we're looking at boilers, I'd say yes, we need to have something like sort of
I
understand.
think
what-
that's my understanding, is what
Yeah.
And it
this
was
is.
like
I was looking at this as like,
roofing
okay,
and
the window
warranty
crack, we
No,
need
no,
to,
no, I
or the
understand.
carpets, like we need to do the
I
carpets.
think this is a 10-year plan plus stuff that needs to be replaced.
So like, yeah, I guess for that, I can understand that, but I was thinking it was more, what I call it, regular maintenance type.
But
stuff.
there was a kind of a mix in the last plan. I want to separate them.
All right, okay. Yeah, that makes,
So at the risk of getting petty, you could change A to 2 and just put 2 into 1. Implement identified and approved components of the long-range facility plan through capital projects and a multi-year maintenance plan. And then A becomes 2.
A becomes 2.
Or do you want those to be completely separate things? I guess I'm not understanding what the
I think I
bylaw
liked,
is here.
I thought that the first one was new
Well,
projects
yeah,
rather
well-
than we need to fix something that's broken. But
well,
Well, if you're talking about boilers, that's in 10 years, we need a new boiler, which would be.
no,
Right,
by
but I
new,
guess what you're trying to
I
do-
mean conceptually new, like an addition or a.
So it feels like there should be one that's talking about the current construction plans.
Yes.
Right.
And then another one talking about ongoing maintenance.
Yes.
And
if
some of
there is
those are big
something.
items. And
right,
those
but.
could be-
I like them
if I can-
separate.
if- The way, so we got the regular well, I'll call regular maintenance, and then
Right.
we've got like the, I'll call them capital maintenance. where- well,
Right.
So that's what that's what, I think that's a good idea, is like breaking those out so that we understand what we're looking at, because, and then we obviously have the facility, so it'd be like essentially 3
Yeah,
buckets.
the big
Right.
capital program.
Yeah.
And as Joel said, DLA, we paid DLA to
Right.
actually
To do
give
the
us a complete
study,
inventory, and
right.
they came up with
Right.
the $10 million number, that's how we got that.
Right.
And I do think we have to sort of continue to look at that plan to make sure that what they say needs to be replaced actually is what actually needs to be replaced. And that there's a couple things that come up recently, I know, that
Right.
we're not anywhere on DLA's, plan, which supposedly we had to look at. But, so I do think we have to make sure that actually that's an accurate.
Starting place and then continue to update it as things
Right.
come up.
Okay,
Okay.
So leave it there as a goal.
I like it.
Yeah.
And I think, again, it has this origin and maybe a sense that it wasn't managed enough, so, okay. Here I was redundant and under, sorry, Dan, I moved this along to finance. I guess that maintain a
good,
solid
that's good.
fiscal position was the goal area, was maintain the district's solid position, solid
so
fiscal
number one
position,
can-
and then I wrote it again, so
Yeah,
there's a
number one can
redundancy
go
there,
away,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because it's in the equitable goal.
The one thing that I would just like to, is under 2 is implement a balanced budget with the use of a conservative 5-year projection. I guess I would like this to be more realistic, because while I'm fiscally conservative and I like being conservative, but we've been very conservative for so long, I think we need to become more realistic, because we always seem to be getting, I think we need to just be realistic in our projections and not conservative, because I think for me, that just sort of implies already that we're going to be having the budget higher than what we really need, and so I just want it to be more realistic.
But I think the multi-year projections show that the budgets, the surpluses slowly get eaten away by just natural inflation and cost increases.
I guess, then for me, that would be realistic. I just don't want us.
But that is what those projections are showing.
Right, but I guess I don't want to just be, I think we need to be real, I think we need to me, to say we're either going to be conservative or we're going to be on this, is that we're setting ourselves up to always expect the sky is falling. And I want us to be more realistic in saying this is actually going to, we expect that, yes, inflation's going to rise at like 2% a year.
Right.
And so we've planned for 2% a year, and not necessarily for inflation rising at 3% a year or something.
But I think the projection, I'm gonna, say, I don't see it in quite the same way, because I think that the projections are showing, for example, inflation might be up at 2%, but healthcare keeps rising at 3%. So our budget outlay keeps increasing past the typical increase we can get from our property tax increases. And that's why those lines do start to converge to some degree.
Right, but I think what he's saying is the
future.
projections
So
are
I'm-
based on very conservative estimates.
Although I might argue, I don't think they're based on the sky
I don't
falling
think they're all that
estimates. I think there's a
They
middle
are
ground there.
realistic.
I
What
don't
if
have
I
a dog in the
kept them
fight.
fairly conservative, but did a lot more explaining of what, almost quantifying those conservative?
The assumptions.
Like if I assume a 5% healthcare and it turns out to be 3%.
Then how does this, how about we just take out the use of consider, I was gonna say implement a balanced budget, like a 5-year projection. Let's just take off like the adjective of saying.
We'll get rid of that entire thing, because I think we're obligated to have a balanced budget by law, are we not?
Yes.
We cannot have an unbalanced budget, is that true?
Well, but it's, you know what, we do use the projections to set,
I think you can deficit spend, but you have to have a plan for how you're going to improve.
Deficit spending.
yeah, to show that we're not in.
Yeah.
a
The student budget would still be
situation.
balanced, though, in that case, wouldn't it?
Yes, yes, it
I mean,
would.
you have to get
So
the
it's
money
more
from
the
somewhere,
5-year
right?
You have to get it right.
Whether it's written or not.
Yeah.
Right, I mean, let's just take that out.
But the long, the
Take
long
word
Just to-
conservative out.
So your
you
point
can
being
change it
that
to realistic.
without the word conservative,
I would just say,
the
like,
line is meaningless?
I'd say
Or
realistic
just take
or
the whole
just-
line
No,
out in
I'm just
general?
saying, I think the line is kind of meaningless as it stands, but because I think having a balanced budget is not hard,
Right.
and it doesn't mean, it's nothing, it's not any statement about whether you are maintaining the solid fiscal position of the district. You could have a budget that's totally balanced, and it could be destroying the fiscal solvency. And conversely, you could have a balance that budget that's not balanced, then it could be, or not, it should be
But I-
deficit spending, but still
What
conservative.
I think is the important part of this line is, well, of course you want to have a balanced budget, but I take what you're saying. But for me, it's more so like making sure that our 5-year projections are updated and accurate and reviewed.
I agree.
That to me is more what
Yeah,
the.
exactly.
It's not.
Updated and
That's the
accurate,
only
maybe
one I
that's.
already hit.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
conservative, I think it's, I don't want to make like, I think when I read conservative in this context, it means to me, we're not stretching, we're not mean like
Right, you're being.
rosy,
See,
rosy.
Right, and I guess conservative for me means, it's gonna, I know inflation's been like 2% for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
I'm gonna make it 3%, just in case this is the year.
Yeah, I
that
don't
it's
think we're
gonna-
doing that, you're not doing that.
But I guess that's how I view
Yeah.
conservative, and so I'm not.
I'd say there's like a 70% chance we're gonna do better than that.
Right, and so I
So
guess my thing is, let's just take the whole, let's just say we need to do a projection of 5 years.
No, I don't care, I just-
Let's not say conservative, realistic, or liberal, or
Realistic
spendthrifts,
is,
or.
I think,
Spendthrift.
I do want to, I'm not thinking the right but put an adjective on there that says this
We
is
wanna be
a realistic budget. Or, sorry, a realistic projection, it can't be.
But to the extent we're surprised, I think we want to be surprised in a good way rather than a bad way.
I
We'd rather-
agree
We
with
would
that.
sort of like say, oh, we have $1 million more than we thought we were going to have,
Right.
rather than we've got $1 million less than we thought we were going to have. I'd much rather be in the former case than
So
the.
I
Yes.
go with the word realistic.
Yeah, let's change it to a realistic.
I don't like that word personally.
If we're
I think it should
updated,
just be
accurate, realistic.
Making financial decisions
Accurate.
based on an updated and 5-year, like make.
I do like
think the point is
updated,
we're-
regularly updated.
I like
or-
the updated too.
I think the point is that Jim has created a projection that's going to be updated and we're reviewing it and we're, like making decisions based on that. I mean, I don't know if I care about the adjective that you put in front of it, conservative, I don't,
Updated and likely, or updated and,
I don't know, I think it's just that we're making decisions within the bounds of, we're looking ahead.
Right, yeah.
Planning this out.
No,
Right.
Yeah.
looking
I
ahead.
don't know how
and-
to wordsmith it, I don't really.
And that we're not, as Jeff said, that we're not,
Surprised in a bit.
taking a look at things that are never going to come to pass. Or the only way we're balancing the budget is by taking account into things, that have no chance of ever coming to be.
I'm fine with the way it's written, actually, honestly, I don't think
I
it's.
don't really care. I think if we know what the
Any-
intention is, I don't really care how it's
I
written.
didn't mind it, and I don't mind conservative projections.
I don't. Can I make one little point? This is like, our strategic plan has 5 goals, and finance is goal 4.
Yeah, it's a bit demoted here, I see.
I know
So
it's-
finance just didn't get a district, so I think there should be district goal 4 in front of finance, and then
Okay.
district goal
I
5.
totally agree with
Gotcha.
that.
Well,
Yeah.
I think it's just.
It looks
it-
strange
Yeah.
to
Oh,
change it, yeah.
Joel already did that.
Joel already did it.
No, I was just reading, and I know that we have 5 goals
Yes.
with the
Thank you.
strategic plan, and if we're
Yeah.
gonna.
Yeah.
So it just
I
got
think
dropped.
that's just-
Makes
No, I know,
sense.
That was
because
just
it
a-
looks like
Yeah,
it disappeared.
that was just oversight. I would
Yeah,
say.
no big deal.
Gail?
That's the kind of stuff I add to this conversation.
Thank you.
Number 5.
Words.
And a goal, no
But it's
formatting
important
mistakes
because
will be
it's-
Well,
tolerated.
make sure this is based on the strategic plan that we should be,
Yes, no, it should have some
Yeah.
cohesiveness.
Yeah.
all right, everybody's getting tired, so can we?
You're
How do we feel about educator
8:48.
quality? All right.
Yeah, so are we done with the finance portion of the discussion?
Yes.
Is everybody good? Okay.
District goal 5.
District Goal 5 is human resources. Educator and employee,
Actually, I see
educate.
human relations. I found that human relations is what the strategic plan says.
No,
Are you
okay.
catching that for me too, Linda?
Educator and employee.
That's no.
How about educate and employ?
Yeah, that is misstated, educate and employ.
All right.
I guess one question I have, Martha, for you is, maybe for Angela as well, is that we know that under Merrill that we introduced these, what do you call that? I can't remember.
SLOs, student learning objectives, the
No, the,
student growth measures?
Danielson?
Danielson thing, yeah. And from what I gathered, that was like extremely time intensive, like, and the principal was spending all the time evaluating people. And you were talking earlier about like, is this really, we don't want to be filling out forms because that's the process. You want to be making sure it's meaningful. And I guess one of my questions is that, like, is this an area where like we feel like we're comfortable with all these elaborate, program protocol, or is this something that
So we
could
must
actually
use
reduce
an agreed upon research-based tool, of which the Danielson framework is one, and there are like 2 others that the state allows. They are all incredibly time intensive. I mean, you raise
Okay.
an excellent
So
question.
you're saying it's not an option.
It's not really a
mandated.
choice.
Okay.
It is incredibly time consuming. It speaks about the indicators of high quality teachers, and so I think we have these conversations that are about, this is really about how you grow your teaching staff and you coach and you support and mentor and advise. It is the state that would need to come to the wisdom to
Okay.
say, but you know what, it's taking principals too much time.
Okay. I didn't realize that was mandated.
I have an everyday nuts and bolts question.
Okay.
I know that you're new, Angela, but will you be taking on any of those principal evaluations, or will you be standing kind of from an umbrella view watching that? Because I know Meryl would do those.
Actually, I do all the principal
Was it
evaluations.
just you? I thought Meryl was doing some of them.
Yeah, she would look at the student growth components with me, but yeah.
Because I didn't know if that would be too much for first year.
With 5 of them, and then the other district office administrators, so actually
Right.
Jason is evaluated by Angela and Don, and then Christy
Okay.
is evaluated by April structurally, but
All right, as long as you feel
I
like
do the
it's doable.
evaluations. I do.
Yeah,
I
okay.
think it's an important part of the work I do.
Yeah. No, I don't mean to take you out of it.
Yeah.
I just mean, should she be doing it while she's getting to know everyone?
Right.
You're like, yay, one more thing to do.
Good.
You're welcome. Okay.
But yeah, Jeff, your question is a great one. It's one that the principals and even our teachers would say, wow, is this how we, it's a time-consuming process.
Is there, and this isn't really part of the goal, but is there talk in this, like you say, it's state mandated, so we have to do this. Is there conversation going on about how labor intensive and is, not
I think there's
here,
conversation
but
about how
at the
I think there's
at the
conversation
state
about how
level.
labor intensive it is, but what I haven't heard is any follow-up to saying we should
What we
do something
could do.
Right.
about it, right?
Okay. So those conversations aren't yet really happening, so we're really kind of just living in that.
Yeah.
The only question I have about this goal is, we want to make it a goal to make partnerships with universities for hires. I know we had those years ago.
Oh, for hiring, yeah.
For hiring, those interns that we had, and then Mr. Cowley and some of the other, I'll just call them old
It was part of the
wise people.
strategical discussion, I remember that.
So we're talking about job fairs, recruitment,
Yeah,
right?
gave suggestions that we should have a regular partnership with universities so that we have a pipeline for best and most qualified candidates, and it'd be nice to see that.
Right, so it's interesting, when I see 10 job fairs to enhance recruitment, I think of that differently than university partnerships. So I think of university partnerships,
I mean,
something
very
where you might like
specific.
ask, really encourage student teachers to come your way from a particular district.
You talk to their coordinator, the people that are identifying their strengths and their
They might even offer-
certifications. You can
Yeah.
talk to the certification officer and say, oh, look, I've got these people, you can develop partnerships.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a recommendation that we had maybe 15, 16 that I thought might be, I don't think we've really fully utilized that opportunity to kind of, because there's a teacher shortage and it'd be nice to get the best and the brightest and to have a relationship.
Right. But I think of the relationship where that we may want that to be would be something like the University of Illinois or
Absolutely.
Michigan State. Or,
Absolutely.
there's some universities
Yeah.
that, which is not necessarily sort of our backdoor local university.
No, and I don't know if it has to
Yeah.
be, but just to have communications, I don't think is a bad thing, and to try to reach out. It was not my idea, it's something
Yeah.
that the superintendent.
But I do think that it's different than attending job fairs.
Yes,
Oh,
yes,
Yeah.
Yes.
it's.
Well, I guess
something
would it
remember.
be-
A lot of,
I don't know if
guess,
Jeff
are
would
there-
remember that, but they
I do remember, yes.
suggested it, and I always
Was it
thought it
Griff?
was
Wasn't it
something we
Griff's,
could do.
Griff's idea?
Was that?
Was it Griff's idea? Griff Powell?
I don't know if it was Griff or it was, is it Kelly, his last name?
Dennis
oh,
Kelly?
Dennis Kelly, I think it was his idea, which I always thought was kind of intriguing, but.
Are there a lot of educator-based job fairs?
There are
Well,
some,
I wouldn't
and
say a lot.
I don't hear from educators who are out there hiring that is the effective way to go
No,
retain
Well, then
teachers.
that
I agree with that. yeah.
that's something to look at.
This day and age, job fairs almost seem arcane.
Yes.
Unnecessary.
Go in
Might be
and
why,
walk,
yeah.
walking, you know.
even imagine.
Yeah.
They happen, and they happen more at universities at the university level for hires that they're making at the
Right, yeah,
university.
no, yeah,
not
no.
for-
I thought you were going to say the
for-
university partnerships around the research area, Sherry.
Well, well, I'm glad you said that, because then we can double dip on
Right,
that.
right.
Thank you, interesting.
Yeah.
But I also for hiring, I think it's just something that one of those guys that was a super for 30 years said, oh, we started this years and years ago, I think it was at LT or I forget where he was. I said it really helped them
Right.
hold from their.
We did it when I was in River Forest with Concordia in Dominican because they were in, truly, they are in
close.
River
In your
Forest. And it was, we would take in a lot of student teachers, and then in turn, they would also like offer a course, like a course on using technology in education or
Right.
something like that, at a very discounted rate for teachers that were interested. Kind of a different setup, because I'm not sure then that we hired a lot of teachers from Concordia or Dominican.
No, I think what he had mentioned was actually a relationship with the certification officers, so that you get a heads up and they get a heads up for who's looking and they want to look for the best. So we're hoping to be that. It's just an idea.
Yeah, and I think in terms of the teacher shortage, I think it's real. I
Yeah.
think we haven't been hurt by it. I do think the principals and even myself, when doing the hiring, they found the pool was smaller, but we were still able to really get, I think, the high quality people. I think because we're an attractive place where I think teachers want to come and work, we are finding the substitute shortage is very real.
I actually got to see Mrs. Skaggs, this is an aside, who is a longtime 30-year teacher here at Central, and she had subbed for my daughter, and I thought it was kind of cool to see that they've actually pulled from the retired teachers as substitutes.
I've seen several retired teachers in this past.
I have, I've seen
Yeah.
several, and it was, in a way, it was really neat.
Since you mentioned the sub shortage, I was wondering, is that worthy of its own goal? Any attempt to mitigate that, or is that not possible given the market?
So it's another good question. And talking to other superintendents is something superintendents talk about when they meet. So there are some districts that have given like a finder's fee. They've raised their rates a lot, and they're having, what they're sharing is they're really having no more success getting people in. I mean, there's just not a lot of people out there. I will tell you one thing that has come up, though, and if this was, is this idea of hiring a permanent sub, that you hire at least one person on your staff. Some districts do it like one for every building.
Interesting.
And you hire them to be your full-time employee because you can assume that they have some assignment every single day. It's putting people, it's increasing your FTE count, giving somebody else, medical benefits. So there's a cost to it. Jim and I have kind of gone back and forth about looking at, our principal, particularly like April said, go look at what our internal subbing rates are. So we have a mechanism at Hauser where teachers can give up their plan time and
I
get
used to
paid.
do that. It costs the district more than.
It costs the
yeah.
district money, but it
But-
gets good coverage in the classes.
Yes, it's much better for the
yeah.
kiddos, yeah.
Yeah, so I would say, in a roundabout way, yes, perhaps thinking about how to address the sub-shortage, which might be an outcome, maybe considering a different staffing pattern internally.
I also like, we've actually, I personally have seen a lot of residents, like parents and different people who had a teaching degree or might have stopped working because they had kids or something. I've actually seen some of those people in our district
Yeah.
working, and I think that's a really neat place to reach out. They know our kids, they know the environment, and I wouldn't mind seeing more of that.
When you've been talking to the superintendents and you as well, obviously, is there any theories about why substitutes are not as?
Have you ever subbed?
I've been exposed to a couple.
I'm trying to be
I think it's about I think it's about the teacher shortage. So there's not a pool of people that didn't get the desired jobs
Right.
that want to sub.
Who are waiting.
I think it's all
So
yeah.
Do you think it's related to the economy in the sense that the economy is kind of doing well and so there's a lot of
Right,
People
opportunities?
have employment, and so there aren't
Usually if the
people.
economy goes into recession,
Certainly.
you might start looking
I think
attractive
it's
again,
definitely
right?
true.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a piece to that.
It's a hard job.
This reads very focused on teachers directly. Does there, or should there be anything in here around non-teaching staff? Or is the intent that staff includes anybody within the
Right.
district? More of an interpretation of how you
Right.
wrote it.
Yeah, I
Right.
could have met everybody, but that's just me.
Like, I think high-quality relevant PD is for everybody, like administrators included. Yeah, I think in terms
I
of,
saw staff as everyone.
yeah. I think of staff, faculty I tend to think of as the teaching force, staff as everybody. Like we say educator and employee, so educators tend to be the certified people, employees are the people that don't have a certificate, a teaching and education certificate.
All right. I'm fine with that. Just wanted to ask for clarity on how it was intended to be interpreted.
One thing, explicitly put a goal there about improving collaborative opportunities that support staff professional growth and learning. So that's something that has been a work in progress really for a while, but I think it deserves to sort of that explicit mention. It's really about how we created the additional time in the teacher contract for more
Yeah.
teacher groups to work together.
How many do we
It also,
have
I think,
now?
sort of identifies that as a real value.
12, yeah.
A real intention of how we work together. I think there are people that would tell you historically, teachers that would tell you that they didn't feel that the administration wanted to hear their voice. And that's sort of something culturally we've been working on. No, we do. That's how we plan really good professional development. That's how we really know what's going on in classes and what teachers need more of. So that's why we've restructured a all district leadership team. That's why we have the 12 75-minute PDs. That's what so again that's an area of significant focus, and perhaps it's the area that helps us, increase student achievement too. I mean, that's the intention behind that one.
Do we have another
So-
one of those coming up, the 12?
12 75-minute PDs, we do. This Monday, we have one coming
I
up.
thought it must be time because it seemed like it's been a while
And
since
2
I-
weeks from Monday, we have another one.
Any other thoughts or questions on that one?
Anything else under HR? All right. Should we close the book on goals?
Okay.
Bob left. So.
All right. All right, next up are committee reports. I think we'll
Wait, I
wait
got
for
a
the-
lot on policy.
This is all within the committee.
Serious,
Maybe not
I was about
policy.
to like cry.
I think we'll waive, without objection, I think we'll waive committee reports this evening. Yes, that's true.
Well, I have to say, though, I just parenthetically, that I think that this kind of discussion, although, I don't know how much we really progress, I think it's important to have
I
this
agree.
discussion. Even
Oh,
though we
yes.
don't, necessarily.
I think we need to commit to having this earlier. I know
Yes.
it was hard this summer, but
Yes.
now that we all know that this is.
And maybe
gonna
on a
be the-
fairly regular basis, maybe
Yeah,
more
that
than
should
once
be a
year.
goal.
Yeah.
What should be?
Maybe, yeah.
Right.
Perhaps it is.
Well, so because we're the first Wednesdays, July is always around the 4th of July,
Yeah.
and then August sort of feels like this time where people are kind of in vacation
And
mode.
we
So,
always, or one meeting a month.
and then
is fine,
sure
but
enough,
we
by
do need to
board
make-
meetings, we have enough other actions that become
Yeah.
very important, whether it's
No, I agree
approving.
though. I think this is incredibly important and I think we should
Yeah, I agree.
make the time to do
I
it.
always think they've been good.
But yeah, I agree. Ideally, it's a summer activity.
Yeah,
Definitely.
But yeah.
and it would be great to do it after we've reviewed
Good.
the end year and look at it and then it's just, it's a nice process.
Yeah.
So.
All right.
Thank you
You
all
want to
very
talk about
much.
future meeting
I'm
dates?
thinking, for the benefit of the camera, I guess I will. So Future meetings, October 16th, regular business meeting at 7 PM in the Hauser Learning Resource Center. Board will enter closed session at 6:30 PM if necessary. October 30th is the Committee of the Whole meeting, 7:30 is listed, I'm sorry, excuse me. October 30th is a special meeting at 7:30 PM at Hollywood School. November 6th is Committee of the Whole, 7 PM at Hollywood School. If there is nothing else, the meeting is adjourned.